Chapter 1859. Feng Qi was the disciple of the first-generation Supreme Phoenix Flower, the strongest cultivator in the North region. Although she wasn't the youngest, she was the oldest, regardless of her talent. Who would dare to underestimate this 70-year-old woman with nearly 2,000 years of cultivation? Zhang Lu had followed the Sunset War god since he was a child. He had been trained by Dendi and Zhang Wu, two peerless cultivators. He had learned the essence of the Emperor's methods and entered the unblemished realm at a young age. His talent was unparalleled in his generation. In his first battle, he was on par with Emperor Mu of the East Sea. The second time, he directly killed Dendi. Although Qin Hao's cultivation hadn't returned to the peak in the Valley of the Gods, it was enough to let the world witness the power of Zhang Lu. Today, Zhang Lu and Feng Qi were facing off. One was a peerless genius, and the other was a leading figure in the Northland. People couldn't help but feel nervous and expectant. Rumor has it that the Phoenix Flower Supreme ancestor has peeped into the mysteries of the way of the heavens. If it weren't for the fact that her lifespan was exhausted, she might have become a god. Today, I have the honor of discussing the way with the seventh disciple of the Phoenix Flower Supreme ancestor. Senior Feng Qi, please don't be soft-hearted. Zhang Lu looked at Feng Qi calmly. His deep eyes flashed with unparalleled sharpness. Sigh. Feng Qi's voice was hoarse. Her robe fluttered. Her old body slowly rose into the sky. Zhang Lu did the same. He and Feng Qi came to a height far away from the training ground. It was as if they were standing at the top of the sky. The two figures faced off in the air. Grandmother Zhu. Yinro looked up at the old woman. She was nervous. Grandmother Zhu was fighting for Bao in this battle. Whoosh! Above the sky, a sword Qi that was too fast to be seen with the naked eye passed through. Elder Feng Qi's crutch burst out. It was complicated but simple. A sword Qi, a wisp of sword will. However, this light seemed to contain all the methods in the world. It broke through the great path of space. With a thought, it appeared in front of Zhang Lu and pierced through his head. So strong, someone below said. They were terrified. A simple sword broke through the space and didn't affect the operation of the great path. Was this the peak of the way of the Emperor? But this sword couldn't hurt Zhang Lu. No one was stupid enough to think that the young master of the Temple of the War. It's the Fleetfoot Steps, Jin Chen said. Such a short distance, such a fast reaction. The perfect combination of the will of the Emperor and the movement seemed to be one with the great path. Only Denda's famous ultimate skill, the water-wind divine stride, could have such amazing power. The sword intent isn't fast enough. The voice of Battle Tower rang out in the sky, its flat tone mixed with a touch of contempt. Immediately, everyone saw a series of swift and violent afterimages falling from the position above Elder Feng Qi, carrying an incomparably heavy and majestic momentum, fiercely colliding with her. Bang! Feng Qi's body was blasted away. No one could imagine how much force she had withstood. They could only watch as Feng Qi flew back crazily like an old leaf that had turned yellow and fallen. In an instant, she had moved more than 300 meters horizontally. When her figure stopped, a roar suddenly erupted in the void. It was terrifying, as if she had crashed through a mountain. Grandmother! Many island masters and elders of the 9 lineages were incomparably nervous. Their faces were covered in cold sweat. Grandmother Zhu was already at the end of her emperor's path. Cough, cough. Feng Qi coughed a few times. Her stooped body trembled slightly. Half of the bones in her body seemed to be broken. Her blood was about to be blasted out of her body by Battle Tower. The young master of the War God Temple was indeed terrifying. Give her to me. Otherwise, the next move won't be the sword hilt. Battle Tower's domineering figure stood tall and looked down at Feng Qi. Just now, he had only used the sword hilt to point at Feng Qi, not the blade. Fighting with an old woman who was nearing the end of her life, it was an unfair victory. Besides, Feng Qi hadn't completely entered the unblemished realm. Unfortunately, no one could stop his godfather's great cause. Today, even if he had to kill Elder Feng Hua, he had to do it. I'm really old. Fengqi shook her head and smiled bitterly. She couldn't advance her emperor's path. Even though she had a powerful emperor's path, she couldn't support her aging body. However, even if she had to risk her old life, she wouldn't hesitate. A layer of transparent light flowed around Fengqi's body, circulating up and down. She didn't have the emperor's ring or the true meaning of the great path. After a warrior comprehended a wisp of the unblemished path, the emperor's will would merge with the great path. She was the path. Feng Xiao Tianji. An angry roar shook the sky. Fengqi threw out the ancient staff in her hand. Her fingers formed a sword. An endless sword light erupted from her old body. The great path roared, and the ancient staff was filled with brilliant light. It turned into an unparalleled divine phoenix. Sikong Shu couldn't compare to the divine phoenix condensed by Elder Fengqi's will. The fiery red wings covered the sky, and the flames of the way blazed, filling the sky. However, the divine phoenix let out a sorrowful cry, as if it was saying goodbye to the younger generation of the sect on behalf of its master. Grandmother, Yin Ro and the other island lords shed tears. The elders of the 9 branches knelt down at the same time. This elder of the sect had chosen to leave in the most glorious way. She was fighting to defend the dignity of Phoenix Flower and protect the younger generation of the sect. The island lords knew that if she didn't fight with Battle Tower, Grandmother wouldn't be able to survive this year. This was also why the 9 branches held the martial arts symposium to elect a goddess. The elder wanted to see the new goddess of Phoenix Flower take over the burden of the ancestors before she died. The ideal candidate in her heart was Bao, so she had to fight. Why? Battle Tower's expression changed slightly. Handing over Bao could resolve this dispute invisibly. But he knew better that according to the temperament of the 9 branches of Phoenix Flower, they wouldn't do such a humiliating thing. They had fallen into his foster father's trap. This was the result that the Sunset Battle God wanted to see. No matter who she is, whether she is Dinda's daughter or the disciple of Phoenix Flower, she is just a child in my eyes. Fengqi's body erupted with an astonishing brilliance of swordsmanship. At this time, she silently glanced down. Bao was sleeping peacefully in Yunro's arms, just like how she used to sleep in her arms. It was a pity that she couldn't see Bao, wearing a crown and being worshipped by tens of thousands of people. What a pity. In the name of the god of war, Zhang Lu raised the broadsword in his hand above his head. In an instant, lightning and thunder flashed in the sky, and huge cracks appeared. His body was surrounded by endless fighting spirit, and his eyes turned into a noble platinum color. He seemed to be possessed by the god of war of the heavenly realm, and a majestic phantom of the god of war descended on his body, overbearing beyond compare. I bestow upon you a decent home, Battle Tower murmured. Silently muttering a sentence, Zhang Lu's sword slowly slashed down, releasing a shocking light. Screech! The divine phoenix that blotted out the sky rushed toward the sword light. It stirred up a monstrous storm, trying to tear apart the falling sword chi. The entire Northland looked like it was the end of the world. Boom! The great path trembled. Countless spatial faults appeared in the void. The huge body of the divine phoenix was torn apart from the center by the sword light. It pressed down on Fengqi's head from a great distance. On the path peak, the disciples of the 9 branches knelt down and cried. Many imperial lords lowered their heads and sighed. They couldn't bear to watch. Only Feng Gaishi looked at everything calmly. The smile on his face grew wider and wider. Let's stop here. At this time, a voice suddenly came from the path peak. Immediately, a figure flew out of the solemn hall. This figure instantly stood in front of Fengqi. Along with this, the divine item of the 9 branches, the dream branch, which was suspended high in the sky like a star, exploded with soaring might. Visible to the naked eye, endless spiritual chi from all over the Northland rushed toward the dream branch in a frenzy. It blended with it and entered its brilliance. It seemed to be absorbed. An imperial implement mobilized the power of a realm. Boom! A deafening muffled sound came from the sky. It was as if the great path had collapsed. The imperial lords of the 5 realms looked over. They saw that the sword light was broken by an inexplicable force and disappeared between heaven and earth. Jean-Loup also seemed to be bombarded by the great path. His domineering figure frantically retreated. He was extremely embarrassed. When he regained his footing, he looked at Feng Qi with an ugly expression. Greetings to the Supreme of the 9 branches. Greetings to Phoenix Flower Supreme. Below, the disciples of the 9 branches shouted in unison. Many imperial lords also bowed slightly toward the void. Their tone was respectful. Bao as a disciple of Phoenix Flower, should be protected by the 9 branches. If the war god temple insists on doing things its own way, the Northland doesn't mind going to war. At that time, I'm afraid the war god will have to come personally. At this moment, in front of Elder Feng Qi stood an unparalleled figure. Although her appearance could not be said to be devastatingly beautiful, her temperament was incomparably transcendent. Just by standing there, she did not look like a mortal and gave off a natural sense of oppression. Feng Lan. Jean-Loup looked at her with a slightly shocked expression. The current Phoenix Flower Supreme, the strongest cultivator in the Northland, was also Feng Qi's martial niece and Yun Ro's martial uncle. But he was not surprised by her identity, but her strength. To be precise, he was surprised by Feng Lan's strength after controlling the Dream Branch. Feng Lan's cultivation was not too high. Compared with Feng Qi's elder, she had stepped out of the true self realm, but had not completely entered the unblemished realm. However, after controlling the Dream Branch, Feng Lan was vaguely comparable to an unblemished Great Emperor. This could not be underestimated. Rumor has it that the Dream Branch was tempered by the will of the first-generation ancestor of Phoenix Flower. It blends with the Qi of the Northland. With the Dream Branch, you will be invincible with the power of the Northland. Jean-Loup had learned his lesson today. You can leave unless you think you can defeat me. Phoenix Flower Supreme said, I will come again in a month. At that time, I may not be the only commander. I hope that during this period, you will consider it carefully. Jean-Loup said coldly. He silently looked down at Bao, and stepped into the air, disappearing into the clouds. Soon, there was a sound of chariots and golden crows in the void, and Jean-Loup's aura gradually left the Northland. Everyone, do you still want to stay in Phoenix Flower? Feng Lan said faintly to the lower sky. We will take our leave. Please inform us on the day of the establishment of the goddess. The emperors and lords took to the air and dispersed in all directions. Soon, a large area of empty space was cleared in the vast square. Only the people of the 9 branches were left, and the scene was much more bleak. But a sad mood was getting stronger and stronger. Grandmother, the island lords looked up into the sky and cried. Feng Qi's body gradually became transparent, and her aura seemed to be dissipating. Feng Qi waved at the ground. Her wrinkled face looked at Feng Lan and said, Why did you force yourself to come out when you have not reached the imperial path? Is it worth it? Feng Lan smiled helplessly. I can't not even see you for the last time. If Master is here, I am afraid I will suffer again. Stupid girl. Feng Qi scolded and looked at Feng Lan with a serious expression. Bao you can't hand her over. Feng Lan was silent. Did you hear that? Feng Qi raised her voice and reprimanded sternly. Feng Lan looked at Bao unnaturally. After pausing for a few seconds, she reluctantly nodded. All right, in the future, the ancestral inheritance will be in your hands, and Bao will be the successor. I can finally face Master calmly. Feng Lan, no matter what you did in the past, you must put all your energy into cultivating Bao in the future. Take it as making up for your sins. Although I am a woman, I also know what is righteousness. Now I should leave. Feng Qi sighed deeply. She took a step forward, and her hunched figure walked step by step in the air. She calmly landed behind the Dao Mountain, as if there was no more reluctance at this moment. Martial uncle. After enduring until here, tears finally fell from Feng Lan's eyes. She watched the old woman leave step by step and walk towards the ancestral tomb of Phoenix Flower. There, there was a statue of the first ancestor of the sect, Grandmother. The people below all knelt on the ground. Yin Ro hugged Bao her tightly and sobbed. If she did not fight with the war tower, Feng Qi would be able to hold on until the 9 branches crowned the goddess. But in this battle, Feng Qi did not hesitate to attack. Master, disciple is here. May the Phoenix Flower sect be passed down through the ages. Feng Qi's prayer echoed in the air. She walked step by step towards the ancestral tomb of the Mountain of Tao. With every step, her hunched back straightened. Her old face started to glow. When she finally turned back to look at her disciples, she left behind an incomparably beautiful face. There was a sweet smile on her face that was like that of a young girl. Chapter 1860. The news of the North Territory spread and caused a stir in the East Continent. Affected by the atmosphere, the experts from various realms seemed to have returned to 20 years ago. A figure appeared in everyone's heart as if that person had returned. The Phoenix Flower 9 branches martial arts sparring competition caused Bao Er's identity to be exposed. Although Dindi was dead, Dinda's daughter became a thorn in the hearts of the overlords. During this period of time, many people couldn't sleep or eat well, as if they were sitting on pins and needles, especially the forces that had a grudge against Qin Hao. Even such a large family was a bit chaotic. Even if Bao Er's cultivation wasn't enough to threaten them, who could calm down after being tainted by the 2 words Dindi? Fortunately, the battle between the War Tower and Dindi made the War God Temple a shelter for the other forces. Even if Dinda's daughter wanted to seek revenge, she wouldn't come for a while. After all, with Feng Qi dead, the Phoenix Flower 9 branches would definitely become enemies with the War God Temple first. Moreover, if they didn't take action, the Sunset War God wouldn't let Dinda's daughter grow up. There was bound to be a battle between the number 1 overlord of the North Territory and the Sunset Peak. In the vast East Continent, a terrifying undercurrent was surging violently. No one could say for sure when a great war would break out. On the second day after the martial arts sparring competition, the Sunset Peak called back the War God Guards that went out. 30,000 War God Guards were on standby and prepared for battle. More than 20 War God Generals returned one after another and gathered on the Divine Peak. It was said that in addition to the War Tower, the other 2 commanders also returned, as well as the mysterious 4 people of the Divine Martial Hall. The Phoenix Flower sect naturally didn't stay idle. Under the order of the Phoenix Lord, all the disciples of the 9 branches who went out to train returned. Even the group of senior elders who didn't like the rules of the sect and hid in the deep mountains and forests all returned to their ancestral land after being summoned by the Phoenix Lord. No one dared to underestimate this group of old monsters. Among the Phoenix Flower sect's 9 branches, which one didn't have an old treasure? Among them, there was no lack of former island lords who had retired from the position of island lord. Even if their cultivation wasn't as strong as Feng Qi, they were definitely not weaker than the current island lords. The Phoenix Flower sect controlled more than 70% of the territory in the North Territory. Their disciples were spread across the 9,000 small path worlds of the continent, not only in the North Territory, but also in the 5 realms and 4 domains of the East Continent. Many first-rate forces and even overlord forces were inextricably linked to the Phoenix Flower sect. When the Phoenix Flower sect and the War God Temple fought, they naturally couldn't just stand by and watch. Many cultivators laughed and said that the Sunset War God had kicked the hardest iron plate in the East Continent this time. It was true that Feng Hua was a woman, but this group of women was like a thorny flower vine that had sprouted branches and leaves. Now, the vines were spread all over the East Continent. If this battle was fought, it would definitely be unprecedentedly fierce. No matter how strong the Sunset War God's cultivation was, his 3 commanders and 4 supreme great emperors of the Divine Martial Hall would not be able to gain an advantage. At the very least, the White Lunar Pavilion of the Middle World and the Immortal Sect of the West World had already sent many Emperor Tao experts to the ancestral land of the Phoenix Flower. Apart from that, many other first-rate factions were also involved. Moreover, There are likely to be even more experts heading towards the ancestral land of the phoenix flower. There were also movements in the southern border. The Qilin sect that had been sealed for 20 years was finally unsealed. On that day, someone saw several female emperor powerhouses flying towards the northern border. The situation was changing every day, becoming more and more intense. Many people sighed. Even though Dendi had died and caused such a commotion today, it was all because of him. He was dead, but not dead. In addition, there was another interesting thing. It was said that on the day the Phoenix Flower Martial Arts Symposium ended, the South Territories' Sacred Sword Wind people were suddenly attacked by the Kim people from the Warring States period, Jinshun. The Wind Monarch, who had not recovered from his injuries, was attacked again. The Wind people suffered countless casualties. If it weren't for ancestor fangs that protected his son and grandson, Feng Junfei and Feng Gaishi might have died in the hands of Jinshun. Jinshun didn't become enemies with ancestor Feng. He let him take Feng Junfei and his grandson away. That's what happened that day. At this time, in the eastern border of the East Continent, where the earth veins were the most abundant, there was an incomparably majestic divine peak that seemed to rise from the ground and reach the 9 heavens. Not far from the divine peak was a hilly land where birds were singing and flowers were fragrant. There was a flowing waterfall, and the scenery was quite pleasant. After all, because of the spiritual energy of the sunset peak, this area seemed to emit a wave of spiritual energy that was intoxicating. In a thatched courtyard, Qin Hao, Xiao Han, and Mu Yue were all here. They had lived here for 20 years, right under the eyes of the sunset battle god, listening to their subordinates report on the 9 pulse theory. The situation of martial arts. In these 20 years, Qin Hao didn't change much. At his level of cultivation, unless he suffered an irreversible injury, he would always maintain the appearance of a young man. However, compared to 20 years ago, his temperament was more refined. Xiao Han became more mature and charming. She was full of feminine charm. Vivian sat beside Qin Hao and listened carefully to the report of the situation. Her calm expression exuded a faint sense of coldness. They are both true self-great emperors, but old thief Feng entered the Dao before Jinshun. Prince Qin naturally can't do anything to him. Moreover, completely falling out with the Wind people isn't something that Jinshun can decide alone. His silver hair swayed gently in the breeze. Qin Hao raised his hand and took a sip of tea as he spoke with a smile. It was understandable that Jinshun didn't fight. However, Her Highness Bao Er's situation seems to be different from what Master Han said. This matter. A black-clothed man lowered his head and knelt on one knee in front of Qin Hao. He wanted to say something, but stopped, revealing some worry. Qin Hao looked at Xiao Han and said, I don't find it strange that Bao has evil power. How did she get the rules of thunder? According to the description of the situation by his subordinate, the power of thunder was extremely strong. It merged with the Red Lotus fire without being cancelled out. Qin Hao really couldn't think of any thunder power in the world that could compete with the Red Lotus fire other than the Royal Thunder. How would I know? Xiao Han said blankly. She wanted to ask Qin Hao if there was anything else that he was hiding from her. The more she knew about this guy, the more unfathomable he was. Who knew what else he was hiding? Don't look at me like that. I'm not as scary as the rumors say. Qin Hao felt uncomfortable being stared at by Xiao Han. They had shared the same bed for dozens of years. His frankness was witnessed by the heavens. You have to go there yourself. Vivian pondered for a while. Could it be that Bao Er's bloodline was the result of someone casting a thunder soul? Its power was comparable to the Red Lotus fire and couldn't be underestimated. With Qin Hao's eyesight, he would know at once. So fast. I'm not ready yet. Qin Hao shifted his body. You must be feeling guilty. Xiao Han rolled her eyes at him. For 20 years, Bao Er was born and raised without anyone seeing her. She was already an adult. If she was in an ordinary family, Bao Er would have been married long ago. Back then, she and Qin Hao had gotten married at this age. Qin Hao, on the other hand, had been in God Burial Valley for 20 years without saying a word. Yet, he dared to go and acknowledge his daughter. I feel guilty. I blame myself. Qin Hao drank a cup of tea. Should this subordinate leave for a while? The servant, who was dressed in black and had his face covered, looked at his master and mistress innocently. Why was it so awkward? What's there to leave for? Continue speaking. Qin Hao stared at the servant with a heavy gaze. Yes, ancestor. The black-robed man hurriedly lowered his head and said, This subordinate has already investigated. Phoenix Flower Sovereign was one of the culprits who tried to kill Master back then. She used the flower-plucking hand back then. I don't want to investigate. Confirmed, completely confirmed, Master. The black-robed man prostrated himself on the ground and said in fear. Phew. Qin Hao let out a long breath and slowly put down the cup in his hand. It seems that I have to make a trip to the North Territory. Phoenix Flower Sovereign Feng Lan, Zhou Windy, Xinyuan Wu Tian, the Divine Firmament Palace Master, and the old Donghai Ancestral Patriarch Han Tian were all the 12 villains. Even if Phoenix Flower had adopted Bauer and taught her a 9-meridian emperor technique, this grudge could not be let go so easily. It was a knot in Qin Hao's heart. Hearing this, Xiao Han was a little nervous and thought about Yunro. You may leave. Pay more attention to the movements of the 5 realms. Qin Hao said in a deep voice. Yes, master. The black-robed man stood up, and the air seemed to disperse. He gradually became transparent until his aura completely dissipated as if he had never appeared. A true self-great emperor. Even after more than 600 years, he still can't break your master and servant relationship. He is still loyal to you. Even I'm beginning to wonder who this person is and where you placed him back then. Mu Yue smiled. I'm not that scary. Qin Hao smiled bitterly and innocently. He didn't deliberately place him. He just did some favors back then and didn't want to see a talent wither away. His servant's fate was fought for by himself and had nothing to do with him. But speaking of friendship, Qin Hao didn't expect that his servant would still be so loyal after 600 years. Just like when he saved people back then, the servant had made a vow to the heavens. Today it was fulfilled. Do you need me and Sister Wei to go with you? Xiao Han asked. Fenglan's cultivation was not simple, and she also had a supreme sacred item. It was rumored that Phoenix Flower Sovereign had the Dream Branch and was invincible in the North Territory. Do you think my ability and weapon are inferior to hers? Qin Hao smiled. It had been 20 years. The Great Void Cauldron resonated with the Reincarnation Manual and became more powerful. Dream Branch? It might be very strong, but it was at most similar to the Sunset Bow. It was a pseudo-divine item. Even Qin Hao thought highly of this 9-meridian sacred item. Xiao Han misses Bao. She's not worried about you, Wei Wei said with a smile. Xiao Han chuckled and nodded. Sister Wei knew how to read people. It's not time yet. Bao is safer in Phoenix Flower than with us. Later, I will bring my daughter back and reunite with our family. Qin Hao put his hands on Xiao Han's shoulders. How could he not know what she was thinking? It was just that the time was not yet right. Later, it'll be 20 years. Xiao Han pushed Qin Hao's hand away and turned to walk towards the hut. Qin Hao looked at the teardrop on the back of his hand and felt helpless. Perhaps it was a little cruel to Xiao Han, but he didn't want it to be like this. You go, Xiao Han. I'll guard her. Fenglan's strength is not bad. Although your cultivation is not weaker than hers, you still need to be careful in the North Territory, Wei Wei said. Qin Hao is a dead person in name. If he was accidentally exposed, his 20 years of forbearance would be wasted. Okay, you look after her. I'm not worried at all. Wait for me to come back. Qin Hao nodded at Vivian. Vivian was the one who could understand him the most. Qin Hao silently looked at the cottage. He could hear a slight sobbing sound. Sighing in his heart, Qin Hao pulled up the hood of his loose robe and walked out of the small courtyard. His silhouette walked out of the mountain. I hope that this time, we can have a happy ending. Mu Yue looked at Qin Hao's back and smiled. Then, she looked at the mountain in the distance. Zhan Wu probably wouldn't have thought that they lived at the foot of the Sunset Peak. Qin Hao drank tea every day to train his mind and looked at his good brother. Chapter 1861. During the Battle of God Burial Valley, Qin Hao remembered the Taoist ancestors' maxim, live in the face of death and fought with all his strength. In that battle, he opened up his 3 souls and released the rules of the Great Path, turning into a dragon and evil. He used all the famous emperor's techniques in his previous life. In the valley, the emperors of the 4 regions witnessed the battle. However, he was suppressed by the emperor's Tao. How could an emperor fight against a flawless emperor? Qin Hao estimated that even if he used the divine item to activate the rules, his will would dissipate under the suppression of the great path of the battle tower, just like the undying evil force. In the face of absolute strength, no matter how talented he was, it was useless. With the gap between their levels, how could a tempered martial artist with a divine item defeat Yuan Zhong? However, the battle was one thing. He would not gladly face death. Even if he could not defeat the battle tower, there was no absolute power in the world that could completely destroy the Great Void Cauldron. The complete god-slaying formation of 600 years ago could not do it, and a flawless battle tower naturally could not, unless there was a god with a divine item. Therefore, when the palm struck, Qin Hao used the divine item to protect himself and the power of the palm to cover him. He took Xiao Han and Vivian and left. Naturally, he had to run with all his strength. Before leaving, Qin Hao quietly released the dragon spirit Dharma and transferred it to Bao Er. He also placed a maple leaf on her body. Unless it was life-threatening, the Dharma would not interfere with her life. On the 9 Peaks sparring grounds, the voice in Bao Er's head was the dragon spirit. As Qin Hao's emperor's Tao grew stronger, the power of the Dharma would naturally flourish. Now, without the nourishment of Qin Hao's will, the dragon spirit could maintain itself. At a critical moment, it could even appear to save Bao Er's life. Dinda had to be careful to protect his daughter. Just as the battle tower had guessed, how could Dinda be at ease leaving Bao Er in Yun Ro's care? Unfortunately, the battle tower had guessed wrong. The aura on Bao Er was not Qin Hao himself, but the aura of his Dharma. The North Territory, the head of the 9 Peaks, Phoenix Flower Mountain. Currently, the area around the ancestral lands was heavily guarded. In the vast North Sea, in the Void, and even in the surrounding island cities, there were large numbers of elite Phoenix Flower disciples patrolling not only the ancestral lands, but also the 9 main islands. As the head of the Phoenix Flower faction, the orthodoxy of the current generation Phoenix Flower Supreme, the security here was naturally even stricter. The battle tower had set a deadline of 1 month to hand over the captives. Who could guarantee that they would keep their promise and not make a move here? At this moment, the people patrolling the Phoenix Flower Tao Peak were all martial emperors. Even a fly from the War God Hall would find it difficult to fly in. However, tonight, the Tao Palace of the Windflower Prime, the strongest cultivator in the north, welcomed an uninvited guest. He walked into the palace silently in front of more than 10,000 elite Phoenix Flower disciples and dozens of Emperor's Tao patrols. Who is it? Feng Lan was adjusting her breathing and comprehending the unblemished path. Suddenly, the stranger's aura entered the palace. A pitch-black shadow appeared in front of her like a ghost. Her closed eyes suddenly opened. Then, a man's strange chuckle echoed in the palace. The shadow that appeared in front of her broke out of the palace with a whoosh. He was extremely fast. His aura traveled thousands of miles in an instant, blending into the night like a ghost. Feng Lan broke out of the palace right after him. Her emperor's light bloomed around her. Her powerful emperor's will locked onto the other party. Like a dazzling star, she chased after him into the boundless void. Lord Phoenix. The disciples patrolling outside were all shocked. They looked at the dazzling star that cut through the night sky. Someone has broken into the Tao Peak. The elders were all alarmed by Feng Lan's aura. Soon, many powerful figures appeared in the night sky above the Tao Peak. Each of them flowed with platinum light. Don't come over. Feng Lan threw down an order majestically. Like a shooting star, she sped away, shaking the void and disappearing from everyone's sight. The elders looked in the direction where Phoenix Flower Prime had disappeared with shocked expressions. It was the first time they had heard Lord Phoenix give such a nervous and serious order. It was obvious that the person's cultivation was very strong. Did a war, God Temple Grand Commander level expert barge in? No one went to investigate. Since Lord Phoenix had given the order, the people of the 9 bloodlines had to obey. Moreover, they didn't dare to chase after her. At the level of the elders, they could understand a lot from Lord Phoenix's strange tone. Moreover, from the tens of thousands of disciples and Emperor's Way cultivators sent by various forces, she had directly entered the palace. It was obvious that this person's cultivation was terrifying. If they went, they would only cause trouble for Fenglan. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Intense rumbles sounded in his ears. The terrifying will of the way distorted the space, trying to block Qin Hao's path. However, he was extremely fast. Fenglan's will of the way solidified space was always a little slower than Qin Hao. Yet, she was able to keep up with him closely. It was as if she could block him in the next instant. Qin Hao was dressed in a loose black robe. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly under the hood. That's it. He hadn't even used the Fleetfoot stride. The performance of Phoenix Flower 9 Bloodlines, the #1 cultivator of the North Territory, was somewhat disappointing. However, compared to 600 years ago, Fenglan's cultivation had somewhat improved. Boom! Qin Hao's figure paused midway. His black robe fluttered in the wind. Although he was still in the North Territory, he was very far away from the path peak. It was enough for him to properly display his strength. Fenglan, who was chasing after him, also stopped. The Emperor's light snaked along her body. She frowned and cautiously stared at the figure in front of her. Why did this person suddenly stop? Did he have no strength to run? Who are you? Why did you lead me here? Fenglan wasn't that stupid. The other party had done it on purpose. Qin Hao slowly turned around. His black robe fluttered in the wind. A low voice came from under the hood. A dead person doesn't need to know too much. After speaking, Qin Hao raised his hand and waved it forward. Suddenly, a dazzling sword light cut through the night sky. The terrifying sword light slashed toward Fenglan. The Emperor's light around Fenglan's body tumbled. The turbulent power shook the water of the North Sea. Majestic water light shook the sky. She focused her finger and pointed forward. The sword's shadow, mixed with the cry of a phoenix, flashed out. The 2 sword lights were annihilated at the same time. Qin Hao's right hand clenched in the air. Blood-red flames burned from his palm and directly blasted toward Fenglan. This fire, Fenglan felt an incomparably domineering flame attack her face. She was no stranger to this flame power. She let out a cry of surprise. Her expression changed drastically. Qin Hao stepped into the air. His Fleetfoot stride movement technique was ethereal and traceless. He blended in with the night sky. When the Tao flame blasted out, a dense layer of scales spread over his right fist. A dazzling golden light overflowed from the center of his fist. He activated the battle power of the 9 palaces and appeared beside Fenglan. Then, he punched heavily toward Fenglan. The terrifying power of the punch shook the space and caused a terrifying sonic boom. Slash! Fenglan was shocked. She let out a shrill cry. Her palm was wrapped in an extremely dense Emperor's light. It seemed to have turned into a peerless sword. She slashed out forcefully and shattered the red lotus flames. However, at this time, Qin Hao's fist was close to her. She had no time to dodge. She could only grit her teeth and take it head-on. At this moment, her aura blended with the Great Path. It was as if she had become the source of the Great Path. A fierce power erupted from her palm and grabbed toward the incoming fist. Bang! With a deafening sound, the light on Fenglan's palm shattered. With a muffled groan, she flew more than 100 feet away. Her body was like a sharp blade that could not stop. Even the space was cut open by her. It was clear how powerful Qin Hao's fist was. Wait, listen to me. If you have the strength to speak, why don't you save it for my next move? Qin Hao's voice was extremely deep and gave off an invisible pressure. He pointed out a finger. The flames of the way on his fingertip formed a terrible luster. It was the same as Fenglan's aura. His blended with the Great Path. It was as if he had become the source of the Great Path. A beam of fire burst out and pierced straight toward Fonlan's heart. Golden Finger, you really... Fonlan did not have a chance to speak. The moment she guessed Qin Hao's identity, the tragic scene in the Valley of the Burial God all those years ago appeared in her mind. She already felt guilty. Moreover, Qin Hao's will of the way was not weaker than hers. He had also broken through to the realm of true self and comprehended a wisp of the flawless great path. If Fonlan did not use all her strength, she would not be able to survive. Swoosh! A beam of light appeared in her hand. This time, it was not the condensation of sword will. It released the light of a true imperial weapon. It was incomparably divine. As soon as the light appeared, it seemed to mobilize the entire North Territory. Endless spiritual qi gathered toward the light. The power of heaven and earth descended on her body. She seemed to be holding the North Territory in her hand. Then a sword fell. The peerless sharpness of the way of the sword shattered the Golden Finger's fire without any resistance. Even the Phoenix Flower Mountain, which was far away from the ocean, cried out in surprise at this moment. The people of the Phoenix Flower Mountain could naturally feel the changes in the sea, the terrain, and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the North Territory. Lord Phoenix had used the Dream Branch, a sacred item of the 9 lineages. Countless people were shocked. Who exactly was the cultivator who was fighting with Lord Phoenix? He actually forced her to do this. Swoosh! The divine and dazzling light annihilated the beam of the Red Lotus. Qin Hao's eyes narrowed slightly. He felt that it was somewhat dazzling. There were not many things in the world that could still affect his 10,000 spirit fire eyes. The weapon passed down by the Phoenix Flower ancestor was indeed extraordinary. If you come to take my life, I will have no complaints. But please give me some time to help the sect survive this storm in the North Territory. At that time, however I want to die, I will listen to you. Fonlan held a sword in her hand. Even though she had the sacred item of the 9 lineages in her hand, her tone was pleading. What happened in the past had always been her inner demon. Only after that did she realize that she had made a mistake. For the past 600 years, she had lived in guilt all day long, which made it difficult for her to make any progress in her cultivation. Today, the other party came to collect the debt. To her, it was also a relief. She did not have to live so hard anymore. But as the Phoenix Flower Sovereign, she was worried about the 9 lineages. If she died, who would resist the suppression of the War God Temple for the Phoenix Flower sect? She could imagine how tragic the fate of the disciples of the 9 lineages would be. Moreover, she was not only doing this for the disciples of the 9 lineages, but also for Bauer. You talk too much, Qin Hao said coldly. His gaze fell on Fonlan's hand. An illusory weapon. He did not know how many forms it had, but the more he looked at it, the more he liked it. Although he had left a Divine Path item for Bauer before his daughter had the ability to control a Divine Path item, the Mengji land was indeed an ideal treasure. It was not bad, and Fonlan should return it. Dazzling light flowed slowly as his robe fluttered. Qin Hao stretched out his hand to the side. Suddenly, a flaming emerald light shadow appeared in his hand. It was like a sword, but also like a sharp thorn. The imperishable precepts in his body were activated. Terrifying sword whistles erupted from his body. Sword will swept across the sky, affecting the momentum of a realm that was infusing Fonlan's body. She realized that her hand was shaking. It was not her, but the Mengji land. If you don't die with this strike, the grudge between you and me will be written off. Qin Hao said. He waved the great void divine treasure in his hand. A graceful sword shadow carried the profound precepts of the supreme precepts. It was like a blood-red rainbow piercing through the night. It ignored the rules of the great path and landed in Fonlan's eyes. Chapter 1862. The sharp sound of a sword whistling rang out in the night sky. The sharpness was reflected in Phoenix Flower Prime's eyes. She did not know how fast this sword was because even her thoughts could not keep up with the speed of this sword. An incomparably huge divine phoenix descended from the sky and enveloped Fonlan's body. The will in her body erupted to the limit. Endless light scattered down from the sky, illuminating the long night and bathing her body. A strong desire to live screamed wildly in her heart. Feng Lan's will of Tao instinctively poured into the dream branch, resonating with the sword spirit and becoming one with the power of the north. At this instant, an extremely dazzling radiance surged. A halo swept out from between Qin Hao and Feng Lan, engulfing the night and radiating towards the boundless space. The heavens and earth trembled violently, and the world seemed to have fallen into hell. Soon, the two forces of Tao that were wreaking havoc in the space dissipated. Under the heavenly Tao, even the flawless Great Emperor could not completely destroy the balance of the Great Tao. The shattered faults began to repair themselves. Waves of chaotic spiritual qi calmed down in an orderly manner. Everything returned to order. However, at this moment, the sharp tip of the sword in Qin Hao's hand was pressed against the throat of the strongest cultivator of the North, Phoenix Flower Prime. The red lotus sword fire that carried the law of reincarnation swept away the power of the world on her body. Feng Lan's body was tense. Her entire body was cold to the bone. It was as if the slightest thought would mercilessly pierce through her soul. The dream branch in her hand also became dim. With the dream branch, Phoenix Flower Prime will be undefeated in the north. Qin Hao smiled faintly. The sea breeze blew his robe and lifted his hood, revealing a gentle and elegant face. The silver hair that hung over his shoulders moved with the wind. He exuded a transcendent aura in his elegance. You can humiliate me and take my head, but to the dream branch, please show due respect to the Dendi, who has shaken the four regions, just like the world reveres you. Feng Lan looked straight into Qin Hao's eyes. Blood gradually seeped out of her fair neck. She had indeed lost, but Qin Hao could not doubt the power of the dream branch because of this. If the first-generation grand ancestor was still alive, the person who had a sword at her throat now would not be her. Reverence? If what you said was true, Dinda wouldn't have died twice. Qin Hao sneered, just like how Feng Lan revered him. Send him to the coffin? You know very well that it's precisely because others are too afraid of you that such a scene occurred. Are you mocking me or belittling yourself? Feng Lan said emotionally. Qin Hao looked at her neck. The sword was 3 inches deep. If Feng Lan was a little more agitated, she might die from agitation. With a shift of his mind, the great void sword disappeared from Qin Hao's palm. He said coldly, "If it weren't for Bao, you would have died tonight." Feng Lan did deserve to die, but in the past 20 years, the 9 branches had taken great care of and nurtured Bao. Whether it was Yun Ro, Feng Qi, or the other island masters, they all treated Dinda's daughter as their family and taught her a lot of skills. Today, after killing Feng Lan, Dinda would be criticized by others and become narrow-minded. Moreover, the 9 branches indeed needed Feng Lan to guard them. For Bao's temporary safety, they couldn't touch Feng Lan. Death is a kind of relief. Feng Lan was slightly shocked. Then she lowered her head and said bitterly, "Oh, from your tone, you've lived with guilt for the past 600 years." Qin Hao was a little surprised. Feng Lan looked up and said, "If you killed an innocent person for yourself, wouldn't you feel guilty? Before Da Qin was established, I killed countless people. The crazy emperor, the barbarian emperor, the emperor, and the ghost emperor who ate humans for pleasure." Qin Hao gritted his teeth and said, "Thousands of innocent souls were implicated. Entire clans were wiped out. Women and children were killed. Even chickens and dogs were not spared. It's different. There must be sacrifices in order to establish a great cause. You took Sichuan as your daqin, conquered the barbarians and 5 barren lands in the East Land, established orthodoxy, set up schools, and benefited many future generations. As for me, for my own selfishness, I personally killed such a hero." Feng Lan's words were stuck in her throat. She was too ashamed to say it. "TSK," Qin Hao snorted. If it wasn't for Phoenix Flower Supremacy saying it, he wouldn't have known that he was so noble. "All right, let's not talk about righteousness. For Bao's sake, Who was the one who pulled you in a situation back then and stabbed me in that sun of it could be *TCH God Burial Valley? Feng Lan looked at Qin Hao. She was very surprised that such vulgar words could come out from the mouth of Dendi. The corner of her mouth twitched. After hesitating for a moment, she said, I don't know. A letter was sent to Phoenix Flower Supremacy. It said that you wanted to lead your troops north and sweep away our ancestral land. Qin Hao opened his eyes wide and was stunned. Led his troops north and sweep away our ancestral land? You killed me because of this? It was just a one-sided statement. She didn't even know the identity of the person who sent the letter. Didn't she think about the motive behind it? Where was Phoenix Flower Supremacy's brain? What can I do if I don't believe it? 600 years ago, you were like the sun in the sky. Who dared to disrespect the emperors of the four regions? Xinyuan Wutian was very bold. In the end, you carried the sunset bow and chased him to the southern region. Along the way, you killed the scorching sun duo emperors with a single arrow. The letter said that you swept away Phoenix Flower Supremacy. Would I dare to confront you face to face? Feng Lan's chest rose and fell. At that time, if she went, who could guarantee that Qin Hao and Zhan Wu wouldn't directly kill her? Then, she wouldn't be able to escape. She was the head of one of the 9 branches. Would she dare to gamble with her life? That's true, Qin Hao said. 600 years ago, Da Qin established the empire. It was at the peak of its power, just like what Feng Lan said before, who in the 5 regions didn't respect Dendi. However, she entered the trap and killed someone just because of a sentence in the letter. It was a little ridiculous. She caused Qin Hao to reincarnate like this. It would have been better if he had interacted more back then. Like the other royal families, they would have formed a marriage alliance and taught each other imperial techniques. Then, they would have more trust and a deeper understanding of each other. You really don't know who took the lead? Qin Hao asked again. I swear in the name of Bao don't swear in the name of my daughter. Qin Hao shouted and interrupted. All right, I swear in the name of the first-generation ancestor of Phoenix Flower Supremacy. I really don't know. Impressive. Qin Hao stroked his chin and pondered. Zhou, when he didn't know either. He didn't leave any clues, but he was able to firmly establish Emperor Yuan, the ruler of the 5 regions. He had to praise this method. Do you know the people in the same group as you? Currently, Qin Hao knew that the 12 villains who participated in the God Burial Valley attack were Xinyuan Wutian, the ancestor of the East Sea Sky Shaker race, the ancestor of the Middle World's Yuntian Palace, the Divine Firmament Palace Lord Shenxian, and Phoenix Flower Supremacy Feng Lan. Emperor Yu Jing of the Flowing Island was killed by Zhan Wu. This person was also one of them. Now that 2 of them were dead, 4 of them were known. There were still 6 unknown identities. Maybe Feng Lan had some information. Among the 12, other than me, there is also a woman, Feng Lan said. Even though they were wearing the same secret robes to hide their appearance and aura, a woman's perception of another woman wouldn't be wrong. This was an innate ability. Especially at Feng Lan's level, she was even more sensitive. The answer was obvious. The 12 villains who participated in the God Burial Valley attack were all from the top of the 4 regions. It wasn't easy to find a man, but it was rare to find a woman like Feng Lan, the love-seeking valley's sword mistress. Qin Hao made up his mind. It should be her. However, the love-seeking valley no longer exists in this world. There's also no love-seeking sword mistress. Instead, there's a new love-seeking nunnery in a sea city at the border of the North Sea and the East Sea. The disciples of the Phoenix Flower 9 branches were spread all over the world. Feng Lan knew the situation in the 5 regions like the back of her hand. Even if she changed her appearance and shed a layer of skin, she wouldn't be able to hide from her eyes. Moreover, the love-seeking sword mistress didn't even change her down name. She was just Abbess Wenqing. Other than her, is there anyone else? Qin Hao's eyes shone sharply. He didn't agree to become a nun and wash away the blood on his hands. There's a place in the north called Sanjianku. There's a village there called Ascension Village. Good name, Qin Hao praised. His blood was boiling just from hearing it. Feng Lan rolled her eyes at him slightly and continued. The name Ascension Village was changed later. In the past, the villagers lived a hard life and were harassed by bandits. Later, a miracle appeared here. It was rumored that the gods were protecting the village. From then on, the weather was good. As long as the villagers were willing to sacrifice a newborn baby to the gods every year, the village would be able to maintain peace and live a good life. What is the name of the gods? Qin Hao asked. The god of Qing Shuang, Feng Lan answered. As the supreme being of the North Territory, she naturally knew what kind of strange people there were in the North Territory. Sword Mistress Qing Shuang, you are living a comfortable life. Qin Hao's heart stirred. This old thing wasn't young anymore. No wonder she asked the villagers for newborn babies. Ascension Village is located on the 6th island, under the jurisdiction of Wuhuan. Then it's gone, Feng Lan said. Feng Lan said. That was all she knew, and she didn't dare to be completely sure. Qin Hao had to verify it personally, just like how he had verified it for her tonight. 8. I'll put the remaining 4 on your head. If we find out who it is, we'll call it even. Qin Hao pulled his hood back. Emperor's qi rolled around his body. His eyes stared through the night at the glorious land. You just said that if I survive one sword strike, we'll call it even, Feng Lan said in surprise. It didn't count? But you didn't. Qin Hao turned around and glanced at her. He turned into a long shadow and disappeared into the night. His aura left quickly. Today, he was going to send Qing Shuang to heaven. Aren't you taking Bao with you? Feng Lan chased in the direction Qin Hao left. If the sunset battle god couldn't take her away from Phoenix Flower, how can I take her away? Qin Hao's laughter came from the night. Bao, or would be safer in Phoenix Flower than with him. In the next half a month, many Supreme Masters would die in the 5 realms of the East Continent. If I had the courage to go to Sunset Peak and say it, maybe, there's no maybe. Even without me, you still wouldn't have been able to escape from the array of the gods. A figure appeared in Feng Lan's mind. His aura was like that of an abyss beast. When she faced this person back then, even though she had stepped into the Emperor's path of truth, she still felt powerless. This was the intuition of a master. She hoped that Qin Hao could remove the cloak of this figure. She also wanted to know who this person was. Actually, I survived that sword strike, Feng Lan murmured. Feng Lan heaved a sigh of relief. The heavy stone that had been weighing on her heart for 600 years melted away with a smile on her face. She flew towards the Dao Peak on her sword. Grandmother Zhu was right. No matter what she had done in the past, she had to focus on nurturing Bao. She had to make Bao the new Phoenix Flower Supreme. Chapter 1863. Zhou Windy, Phoenix Flower Prime Feng Lan, Divine Firmament Palace Lord Shen Qian, Flowing Island Great Emperor Yu Jing, Xianyuan Wu Tian, Ancestor Yin Tian, Ancestor Han Tian, Sword Master Wen Qing, Sword Elder Qing Xuan. 9 of the 12 villains had appeared. Yu Jing had died at the hands of Zhang Wu. Shen Qian had been lured away from Shunxiao Palace by Zhou Windy and then besieged by Saint Emperor Jiang and Zhang Guanghe. 40 years ago, the Xianyuan royal family had been annihilated in the Battle of Proud God. Xianyuan Wutian's whereabouts were unknown. Qin Hao still hadn't found his whereabouts. Yin Tian Ancestor and Han Tian had retreated to their ancestral home. It was not easy to kill them without attracting attention. In contrast, Sword Elder Qing Shuang and Wenqing Sword Master had changed their appearances and retreated to the mountains. One had become a nun, while the other had been forced to call herself a mountain god. They relied on eating babies to prolong their lives. It was easier to kill them. Qin Hao was not afraid of exposing himself, now that he had stepped out of the true self and peeked into the unblemished great path. He was very close to the peak of his previous life. There were few people in the 4 regions who could threaten him. If he fought with Zhang Lu again, he would not be beaten like he was in Burial Valley. He might even have a chance to kill Zhang Lu. Of course, he might have to pay a price. Therefore, he was not afraid of anyone. Even if he barged into the Ji's home and Yin Tian Palace, he was confident that he could forcefully take the heads of the 2 old things. However, that would alert the enemy and cause panic in the East Continent. It would make the other villains vigilant and affect their revenge. Especially on the War God Temple, Zhan Wu had the sunset bow, which would be a huge hindrance to Qin Hao. Qin Hao did not want to meet the sunset war god yet. That was the next step of his plan. 9 veins of phoenix flower, Wu Huang land on the 6th island. Sanjiankou. In the vast and boundless North Territory, Sanjiankou was an inconspicuous small city under Wu Huang's control. In this small city, Ascension Village was even more inconspicuous. It was like a grain of sand in the vast sea and a speck of dust in the desert, as if it had been forgotten by the world. However, in the Three Rivers region, the small Ascension Village was well known far and wide, because the villagers worshipped a true god. The true god revealed itself, and its divine might was boundless. Every year, a solemn ceremony was held, and it would protect the peace of the village. With the protection of the god of Blue Frost, the villagers of Ascending Heaven's village lived a good and prosperous life. The only sad thing was that the villagers enjoyed too much peace. The wealth they had was exchanged with the cruelty of their own flesh and blood. As soon as the child was born, before he even had a sip of his mother's milk, he had to be sent to the temple to be offered to the true god. Every year it was the same. The scene of flesh and blood being separated, and the heart-wrenching cries of the mothers were moving. Although this matter was cruel, it was fortunate that the requirements of the true god were not high. Every year, only one child, regardless of gender, was needed as soon as the child was born. According to the village chief's message, the Son of Heaven was to be led back to the heavens, back to the realm of gods. Every 15th full moon night is the day when the great god of Blue Frost descends. The great god's magical power reaches the heavens. As the king of the gods, he is also supported in the realm of gods. In order to quell the chaos of the gods in the wilderness, his divine body was greatly damaged, and he lost 99,999 doppelgangers. Therefore, on the 15th full moon night, the descending child is the great god's doppelganger. The god said, "Summon him to the heavens and return to his original body. Only then will the eternal pain that the great god bore for the people of the world be healed." Pious prayers came out from the shabby, thatched cottage. It was so solemn, making people yearn for it, but also sorrowful. In the thatched cottage, Qin Hao listened to the legend of the god. Facing a skinny old man, he clasped his hands together and muttered, "Pious to the courage of the god, pious to the generosity of the god, pious to the god." In the end, he put down his hands respectfully. Tomorrow is the 15th full moon night. Another doppelganger of the great god will be led back to the realm of gods. Young man, your luck is really good. You are lucky to be able to see the miracle. The old man was as thin as firewood, sitting on a straw mat. Under the dim candlelight, his shriveled and freckled face was like that of a dead ghost. It made people wonder if he would fall apart if he was hit by a stick. 99,999 doppelgangers. How long will it take for the injuries of the god to heal? Qin Hao asked. That's why we, the people of Ascending Heaven Village, have to work hard to have more children in order to bring glory to the heavens. Whoever gives birth that night will have a higher income than the other villagers. This is also the compensation given by the god, because the people who give birth this year are the god's heavenly father and heavenly mother. Pious to the god's generosity. The old man closed his eyes and muttered. Every time he finished a sentence, he would add the words, "the god's generosity." Qin Hao looked at the old village chief speechlessly. The old man was too deeply poisoned. He felt that it was funny in his heart. Although he shouldn't laugh, there were so many innocent children who died in the village. According to the village chief, the great god Qing Shuang had been revived here for more than 300 years. Every year, one child would be more than 100,000 lives. This old man Qing Shuang pretended to be a god, but he was completely inhumane. Fortunately, Qin Hao had come. He helped the villagers and the old man Qing Shuang escape. After tomorrow night's ceremony, the injured great god would no longer have to suffer the pain of having his soul devoured. Qing Shuang would truly ascend to the heavens. Looking at the shabby cottage, The mountain wind poured in through the cracks in the twisted walls and the holes at the bottom of the wall that had been bitten by rats. The kind old village chief looked at the dim candlelight with a pious expression, which couldn't help but make people sigh with emotion. "You should rest. I was just passing by and had the honor to admire the miracle. I will leave after tomorrow night's ceremony." Qinghao got up and said, "Pious to the gods' bravery, the gods' generosity, the gods' mercy." The old man closed his eyes and muttered, "The gods' mercy." Qinghao returned the greeting and turned to walk out. The village chief was old and had been a servant of the god for so many years. He was cautious and conscientious, but his residence was far from being as good as the other villagers. The shabby cottage was incompatible with the other sturdy houses. He was the only one who didn't mix well in the big ascending heaven village. He was really an elder worthy of respect. Yuan venerate. The old man's eyes suddenly opened, and a cold smile appeared under his messy white beard. Another one who was giving him money. He hoped that the harvest this time would be better than the previous one. Otherwise, he would have to waste his emperor qi to go out and plunder again before bestowing the lowly and filthy villagers outside. These animals were truly insatiable. 300 years. To sword elder Cyan Frost, who was trapped here, this was a huge expenditure. The next day, the sun rose from the east, embellishing the view with dew. Standing on a high place and looking down at Sanjiankou, one could see 3 large rivers winding their way over, converging into a torrent that rushed down the cliff. It was deafening and rather magnificent. Qinghao made a rough estimate. There were more than 200 households in this village, but the population was much denser than that of ordinary villages. There were more than 1,000 people. Most of them were children, and the ratio of young to old was seriously imbalanced. It was obvious that the ignorant villagers had suffered greatly in order to have a baby on the 15th full moon. Qinghao released his telekinesis slightly and enveloped the entire Sanjiankou. With a glance, he could clearly sense that there were more than 70 newborn auras in the mountains. Among them, more than 20 were still in gestation, while the other 40 had already been born. Fortunately, the children who were born early had missed the 15th full moon and were able to survive safely. There should be 5 children born tonight. Old man Qin Shuang will definitely choose the one with the most vigorous life force and refine its flesh and blood essence. According to this situation, almost every family in the 200-plus families are trying their best to reproduce. Qin Shuang smiled silently. Qin Shuang was quite strict in his actions and had a good sense of propriety. If his appetite was too big, it would definitely arouse the suspicion of the villagers. Over time, it would develop into anger. One baby rising to heaven was a good excuse, but if several people rose at the same time, they would not be gods but demons. However, the power of a firefly to fill the emperor's path was like a drop of water in a desert. How could it quench thirst and stabilize one's lifespan? After all, it was against the way of heaven. It was inevitable that there would be some serious crimes. Even so, Qin Shuang still wanted to live. How afraid of death was Qin Shuang? "I wanted to end you directly, but now, there's a more interesting way." Qinghao smiled. What would it be like when a guy who was especially afraid of death confronted a rotten person? Soon, a day passed, and night came to Ascension Village. However, the moon was not round that night. The dark night was like the mouth of an abyss beast swallowing the heavens. There was no moonlight at all. The pitch-black space was like a black coffin of death that enveloped Ascension Village. The mountain was especially depressing. A large area was cleared out in the middle of the village. The villagers used stones to build a rough altar here. This place was separated from the rich East Continent by an ocean. The people raised in the savage land did not have the civilization and demeanor of the East Continent's aristocrats. They sang and danced in their own traditional ways, held high torches, and danced strangely. They sang piously around the altar that was full of livestock's heads, praising the great God in their hearts. At this time, many men, women, old, and young knelt below the altar. The skinny old village chief sat on the altar. His face was painted with colorful stripes, and he wore a skull-witch hat. He raised his hands to the sky and cheered. In front of him, 5 men held a crying baby in their arms. They lowered their heads and sobbed like animals that had been labeled and were ready to be selected by the village chief. Those who were selected had to personally put the baby on the altar and recite the mercy of the people to let the Son of Heaven return to the world of the gods. Qin Hao stood in the crowd that could barely be called a square and watched. The ceremony went on for a long time until 5 women who seemed to have gone crazy rushed out of the village with sticks in their hands. In the end, they were knocked down and dragged away by the strong men. Only then did the ceremony come to an end. The villagers of Ascending Sky Village were indeed trying their best to give birth, but it did not mean that the parents were really willing to part with their children. Especially at this moment, this was human nature. In the end, the skinny village chief chose the biggest baby who cried the loudest. He held the baby in his arms and raised it above his head as if he was respectfully sending it to the sky. The villagers' ceremony also went into the craziest stage. They cheered loudly like wild beasts, praying to the god that this year would be too peaceful and rich. My God is generous. My God is merciful, and bless your loyal followers. The village chief made a strange cry and walked down the altar with the baby in his arms. Then he strode towards the temple. The village chief, who was usually trembling and looked like he could be swept away by a gust of wind, was now walking steadily. He took a big stride and faintly seemed to be impatient. Qin Hao smiled coldly and said, "Respected village chief, please allow me to bathe in the god's glory and enter the temple to observe. I will be incomparably proud of my god's generosity." The village chief stopped and cracked his ugly mouth. He slowly turned around with the baby in his arms and said, "Guest from afar, my god has bestowed upon you this honor. In the future, you will also receive the god's blessing, and everything will be as you wish. Enter the temple to observe?" Okay, that would save him a lot of trouble. The god would directly deal with this cultivator passing by and then deprive him of all his wealth and let him sleep in the god's generosity. "Many thanks." Qin Hao bowed slightly. He wore a loose black robe and walked forward with a pious expression. He followed behind the village chief and walked towards the pitch-black temple at the same time. From afar, the temple was like a hole that swallowed the living, revealing a terrifying and gloomy feeling. Chapter 1864. Entering the temple, the interior space was not big. It was like a stone mill with torches inserted into the walls to illuminate. The temperature here was much lower than outside, and the air was more humid, giving off a gloomy and cold feeling. Qin Hao cultivated the great Tao of fire, so his senses were especially sharp. Moreover, as he walked on the flat stone floor, there was not the slightest sound of his footsteps. Very strange. Qin Hao's mind power seeped into the space and sensed a sword intent enveloping the entire temple. The temperature and humidity here were affected by the sword intent, causing a difference with the outside world. Blue Frost power. Qin Hao laughed in his heart. Old Man Blue Frost was an expert in the power of Tao. No wonder it was cold and humid and sound was isolated. The temple was suppressed by the sword intent, so no matter what happened inside, it could not be transmitted outside. Following behind the old village chief, the two of them stopped. In the center of the divine temple stood a stone statue. The statue was very mighty. It was a half-naked man holding a blue frost sword towards the sky. The man's body was strong, and his facial features were strong. His sculpted muscles were plump and firm. The lines outlined were vivid and lifelike, giving people a kind of powerful and majestic atmosphere. Seeing the statue, Qin Hao could not help but laugh in his heart. Obviously, Old Man Blue Frost had passed down the will of God and ordered the villagers to carve it. Even if it was a statue of himself, it had to have a strong body. The old man's pursuit and desire for life was reflected to the extreme. This is the king of gods. Qin Hao slightly raised his head and looked at the statue. The old village chief held the baby in his arms and did not say anything. His eyes stared at Qin Hao, and his face became more and more gloomy. When will the miracle descend and lead the Son of Heaven back? Qin Hao looked at the village chief. God is not right in front of you. The old village chief laughed and opened his mouth, revealing a mouthful of disgusting black teeth. Qin Hao frowned and said, "Village chief, what do you mean?" "What do I mean?" The village chief narrowed his eyes and suddenly shouted, "Kneel down." There was a buzz. Incomparably dazzling emperor light rolled about in front of Qin Hao's eyes. 9 sword rings rang out and appeared under village chief's feet. Behind his head, a halo of the true will of the great Tao descended resplendently, erupting with divine radiance that radiated outwards. It penetrated the stone walls and illuminated the entire mountain village. Looking from the outside, the temple was covered with a layer of platinum luster by the powerful Dili. It was sacred and dazzling. The villagers of Ascending Heaven Village who were offering sacrifices all knelt down and prayed here. One by one, they recited the arrival of the true God. However, in the temple, Qin Hao was unperturbed. Even though the old village head was wearing the emperor's ring and looked as noble as a god, there was no trace of respect in Qin Hao's eyes. In an instant, an extremely awkward atmosphere filled the air. The old village head stared blankly at Qin Hao. His attitude was different from what he had imagined. Shouldn't the cultivator in front of him be kneeling and trembling? Shouldn't they be scared out of their wits and begging for mercy because of his glorious image? Well done. I'll give you 9 points for this performance. I won't give you a single point because I'm afraid you'll get too proud. Qin Hao looked at Elder Qing Shuang with a smile. Elder Qing Shuang suddenly had a bad feeling. A thought flashed through his mind. The black-robed man was not an ordinary cultivator. He was not afraid of the emperor, not to mention that he was the emperor of true self. In the East Continent, he was an ancestor of the 5 realms. Even so, Qin Hao's expression did not change. This person's cultivation could also be disguised. Sword Elder Qing Shuang pretended to be the village head and offered sacrifices for himself. He originally wanted to kill people and take the item. Who knew that he would fall into Qin Hao's trap? Boom! Without hesitation, Sword Elder Qing Shuang struck out with his palm. Although he used his palm, Dili on his palm was as sharp as sword chi. In an instant, the temperature in the temple plummeted. A layer of green frost climbed up and covered the stone walls. It was as if the temple had turned into a 10,000-year-old ice cave. Qin Hao put away the smile on his face and similarly struck out with his palm. Blood-red, demonic flames surged, and ice and fire collided. The 2 palms collided, and the rules of the great Tao clashed. With a loud rumble, the divine temple made of huge rocks shook violently. Ferocious cracks climbed up like lightning, and tongues of fire darted out from the cracks in the walls. The villagers who were kneeling outside all looked over, their faces pale with fear. What is going on? It's been 600 years. Your cultivation hasn't improved at all. Qin Hao let out a hateful laugh. His eyes fell on the baby, and his big hand reached out to grab it. Seeing this, Sword Elder Qing Shuang directly threw the baby to Qin Hao. Emperor's light rolled around his body. Like a fierce sword stream, he pierced through the temple and fled toward the sky. Boom! The temple collapsed. A huge gray shadow broke out from the rubble and rose into the sky. Its speed was incomparably fast, even faster than Sword Elder Qing Shuang. Rumbling sounds came from behind, containing an unparalleled power. He didn't even have the chance to tear the space apart. With a loud roar, he turned around and formed a sword art with his hands. Numerous ice and frost sword streams flew out from Sword Elder Qing Shuang's palms, shattering his statue into pieces. At the same time, a tall figure in a black robe, holding the baby, slowly floated in front of him. "Let me go. I'm willing to be your emperor's servant." Sword Elder Qing Shuang panicked. He sensed Qin Hao's cultivation level, and guessed who he was. He didn't have the chance to escape, not even the slightest chance. "Are you worthy?" Qin Hao said coldly. 600 years ago, he might have considered it. But now, a person with a withered emperor's body, who was trapped by the great limit of his lifespan, what was the use of him? Perhaps this was what Sword Elder Qing Shuang wanted. "Pill Emperor, I'm still useful." As long as you protect me and assist me in seizing a suitable body, I will definitely be able to return to my current state in less than 600 years. No, even 300 years. I will definitely be able to return to my current state. I will be your slave and become the sharpest sword in your hand. Sword Elder Qing Shuang pleaded. If Dendi was willing to help, he didn't need to worry about the difficulties of recultivating. He also didn't need to worry about dying halfway. With Dendi's supreme alchemy skills, his cultivation would be able to travel 1,000 miles in a day. This was his dream. Why would he need to refine the baby and steal its essence? Are you worthy? Qin Hao slowly stretched out his right hand. An incomparably dazzling light slowly condensed on his fingertip. 300 years ago? That was too long. Moreover, he already had a good sword by his side. He was born with the laws of the sword and could be called the #1 sword in the divine wilderness. Qin Hao, don't you want to know who else was involved in that matter? Old man Qin Shuang screamed with all his might. Speak. Qin Hao's expression was cold. Help me recultivate. When I become the emperor of true self, I will tell you the answer. Buzz. Qin Hao's fingertips shone even brighter. The emperor will envelop sword Elder Qing Shuang, and the golden finger was about to come out. Feng Lan, the phoenix flower prime Feng Lan. She is also your enemy. Help me recultivate, and I will kill her for you. Let her die a horrible death. Sword Elder Qing Shuang had no way out and shouted loudly. Useless last words. Qin Hao's face was filled with disappointment. Then, the fiery light at his fingertip ignored the great Tao of space and extended forward like a straight line. It pierced through Sword Elder Qing Shuang's chest and brought out a fountain of blood. Starfrost, chilly winter. The Sword Elder of Blue Frost let out a blood-curdling scream. There seemed to be a wildfire raging in his body, swallowing up his flesh and soul. He endured the damage caused by the rules. The Emperor's will of Blue Frost soared up and resonated with the great path. In an instant, the stars in the sky lit up. Endless starlight shone down, like streaks of frosty sword chi falling toward him. At this moment, the entire Sanjiang Eshuri area was covered with frost. It was as if winter had arrived, covering the earth and burying everything. The villagers of the Rising Sky village cried out. They hugged their bodies tightly. The world was about to be swallowed by the blue frost. The space was filled with terrifying cold air. It was as if they would be frozen in the next moment and scattered into pieces when the wind blew. Total annihilation. Qin Hao raised his fist and clenched it towards the sky. Boom! The heavens rumbled and the blood-red flames covered everything, like a flowing ocean. Streaks of frosty sword chi that fell down exploded and melted into the rock. Suddenly, the frost that pervaded the area of Sanjiangku dissipated, and the temperature returned to normal in an instant. I will fight you to the death. Sword Elder Qing Shuang's skinny body was like a cooked lobster. Traces of terrifying heat flowed out of the pores of his body. His red body was about to spit out flames. Qin Hao snorted in his heart. That's it. It was difficult to even protect himself. What he used to fight? The rolling red lotus fire meandered along his body. The overbearing flame flowed towards the center of his palm. Qin Hao held his palm flat as a huge flame ball condensed and grew bigger and bigger. The terrifying lava dripped along the flame ball. He pointed his finger at Sword Elder Qing Shuang's position. The flaming meteorite left his hand and fell towards Qing Shuang's shoulder. Sword Elder Blue Frost felt as if he was in a volcano, watching the horrifying meteorite pressing down on his head. His facial features were twisted due to fear, and his hoarse voice let out a roar that did not sound like a human's voice. He raised his frosty palms up high, trying to stop the meteorite from falling. However, along with the rumbling sound of the space, the meteorite pressed down on him inch by inch. The thick frost on his palms melted, and his skin was corroded, followed by his body. In the end, his body was covered in disgusting liquid, and his aura disappeared in a beam of fire on the ground. Rumble. The earth shook and the mountains shook. The deafening sound was incomparably heroic. The hill where the village was located seemed to be spewing lava towards the sky. Countless villagers were so frightened by this scene that they held their heads and screamed. To them, this scene was like the end of the world. Cough, cough. Vital essence, baby, give me the baby. I beg you. I don't want to die. In a pitch-black crater, Sword Elder Qing Shuang, who was dressed in rags, was as terrifying as a skinned ghost. He lay there weakly, without the strength to move. There was a painful, burning sensation in his body. His cultivation was being burned by Qin Hao's rules and Dao power. Sword Elder Qing Shuang, who was once powerful in a corner of the East Continent, was now lying on his back like a beggar. Facing the tall, black-robed figure in front of him, he begged Qin Hao bitterly. Qin Hao did not seem to hear him. He looked at the baby in his arms. The baby had not been fed any milk since birth. Perhaps it was tired from crying, so it was sleeping peacefully in Denda's arms. It was a pitiful baby. The baby was pitiful. However, he was not as pitiful as Bao. Today, Qin Hao saved him. 20 years ago, he did not give Bao a father. Is it painful? Qin Hao lowered his head and looked at the bloody sword Elder Qing Shuang. The pain I suffered was 10 times, no, 20 times more than what you are suffering now. I was wrong. I beg you, give me the baby. Qin Hao ignored sword Elder Qing Shuang. He moved his palm, and the baby flew towards the villagers hiding in the distance under the protection of a force. It flew back into the arms of the man who was holding the baby. Qin Hao's memory was very good. Then, he slowly squatted down and looked at sword Elder Qing Shuang. Qin Hao took out bottles of pills and poured them into his palm in an orderly manner. Then, in front of sword Elder Qing Shuang, he put the pills into his mouth one by one. He chewed slowly, as if he was enjoying a delicious meal. Chapter 1865. Far away from the hustle and bustle of Ascension Village, Qin Hao stayed here for a short while. However, to Elder Qing and Sword Elder, this short while felt like an eternity. There was no need for torture, and Qin Hao disdained to do so. He simply squatted in front of Elder Qing and watched him struggle. Qin Hao slowly shoved the medicinal pills into his mouth, even though there was no benefit to eating them. Elder Qing Shuang's cultivation had been destroyed, and the Emperor Realm Expert had lost his dilly. His body, which was already decaying, started to deteriorate at an incredible speed. First, it was his physical body, then his divine soul, and then his willpower. It was more painful than torture. Why would Denda torture a disabled person? Especially in the face of death, Elder Qing Shuang watched as Qin Hao squandered the pills that could prolong his life. He was mentally devastated. Soon, the howling that sounded like a pig being slaughtered stopped. Before he finished eating the medicinal pill in his hand, the all-powerful sword Elder Blue Frost quickly withered as if he was dehydrated. He turned into a dried corpse that was wrapped in skin and bones that lay at Qin Hao's feet. He died in a miserable manner, and his body was twisted to the point of deformity. Qin Hao glanced indifferently and ignored the frightened villagers in the distance. He raised his hand and tore the space apart. His aura disappeared into the void. After the Lord of the Divine Firmament Palace, another one of the 12 villains died. Next, at the border between the North Territory and the East Territory, Wenqing Nunnery. The Wenqing Sword Master became Nun Wenqing. Her cultivation was not stronger than Elder Qing Shuang's, and even worse than Fenglan's. A few days later, a young Taoist nun who took care of Priestess Wenqing's daily life stepped into Priestess Wenqing's room, as usual. Then, a shrill scream of extreme terror was heard. Priestess Wenqing passed away in her room. In the East Territory, the top expert of the 4 regions, Sunset Peak, Warlord Sunset Peak. What do you think? Zhan Wu, who was tall and dressed in a simple green robe, stood up from the throne and looked down. His eyes fell on 3 directions in the hall. There were 3 people in the hall. Zhan Lu stood straight under the throne with a solemn bearing. He looked at Zhan Wu with deep respect. And above the stone window of the temple that was as large as a door, a young man was sitting there. His hands were pillows, and his delicate body was leaning against the window frame. He had a leaf in his mouth, and his eyes were leisurely looking down at the lower realms from the natural superior height of the war god temple. He could see the boundless mountains and rivers in his eyes, appearing very lazy. In addition, there was another bare-chested, brawny man. He was waving his hard, bull-sized fists and smashing them madly at a gold-plated stone pillar in the hall. His fists were wrapped in turbulent emperor chi. Every punch seemed to be able to penetrate a mountain. However, the brawny man was not tired of hitting the pillar. The pillar was undamaged, and there was no sound in the hall. Even so, the brawny man was not tired. Zhuge Xiu was born in the Zhuge family. They were a prominent family in the East Continent. Later, the Zhuge family was destroyed. He followed Zhang Wu by chance and conquered a territory with Qin Hao, establishing the Daqin Empire. Like Wu Lili, who had died in western Liang, he was also one of Zhang Wu's first warlord guards. Now, his status was equal to Zhang Lu. He was also the commander of the 30,000 divine guards on the Sunset Peak. The brawny man was called Kuei Han. He did not even remember his own background. In his eyes, there was only martial arts. His goal was to defeat the Sunset Warlord. Love Saint, Zhuge Xiu. Martial maniac, Kuei Han. Sunset Warlord's adopted son, Zhang Lu. Although their personalities and styles were different, they were all supreme experts on the Sunset Peak. Usually, when one of them appeared, it was enough to cause panic. Now, the three commanders were gathered in the Warlord Temple. In the burial god relic, Zhang Lu let second Master Qing go. It would be strange if Elder Blue Frost and Old Nun Wenqing are still alive. Zhuge Xiu chuckled. His handsome face faced the Sunset Warlord, who was sitting in the main seat of the Divine Hall, and he flipped his hair. Everyone knew who killed them. The only thing they were confused about was that Elder Blue Frost and Old Nun Wenqing were also one of the 12 villains. However, with the death of the two, the confusion naturally disappeared. There were not many people in the East Continent who could kill true self-emperors. It was impossible for the Warlord Guards not to know about Fenglan's movements. If they really wanted to investigate, Zhuge Xiu could even find out what color of undergarment Fenglan was wearing half a year ago. Elder Blue Frost and Old Nun Wenqing had been in seclusion for 600 years and had been killed in a few days. The only thing they didn't know was who killed them. There were not many explanations. Who would take the risk to kill two true self-emperors? What was the reason? Obviously, the person who killed them had a strong motive. Dindi, who was released by Zhang Lu, was naturally the most suspicious. This was enough to prove why Elder Blue Frost and Old Nun Wenqing died. You speak as if you have witnessed everything. Zhang Lu turned and sneered at Zhuge Xiu. The death of Elder Blue Frost and Old Nun Wenqing was his fault. However, the two of them did deserve to die. At least I'm stronger than you. The Warlord Temple has issued a Warlord Order to pay close attention to the movements of the Five Realms. In addition to Xianyuan Wutian, who is hiding here, I also found out that Ancestor Yin Tian and Ancestor Han Tian may also be one of the villains. What about you? Zhuge Xiu asked. What did Zhang Lu do in these hundreds of years? Do you know why we can stand at the top of the four regions and look down on the ants of the five realms? Kuei Han stopped and interrupted. Zhang Lu and Zhuge Xiu both looked at Kuei Han. Kuei Han grinned and said, because those who talk nonsense with us are all dead. After saying this, Kuei Han stuck out his tongue and licked his thick lips. Idiot, Zhuge Xiu said. Try saying that again. Kuei Han opened his eyes slightly and took a few steps toward Zhuge Xiu. Enough, Zhang Wu said in a deep voice. His tall body walked down the stairs step by step. Dressed in a green robe, he looked very plain. It was not as powerful as Zhang Lu's armor in the temple, nor was it as special as the other two's. However, the aura he exuded suppressed the three. Boom! Kuei Han was caught off guard and punched toward Zhang Wu. A layer of terrifying lightning intertwined. The complicated lightning power seemed to be able to tear everything apart. Seeing this, Zhang Wu stretched his arm forward and clasped Kuei Han's heavy fist with his 5 fingers. In an instant, violent lightning snaked up and wrapped around Zhang Wu's body. The terrifying rules penetrated his flesh and wreaked havoc inside his body. A surge of power surged. Zhang Wu's body shook slightly, and he took 2 steps back. Then, the Emperor's light burst out from his palm. With a buzzing sound, Kuei Han's lightning power dissipated. He staggered back, and 4 deep cracks appeared on the ground. Unblemished great perfection. Unfortunately, you are still not good enough. Zhang Wu looked at Kuei Han and said, "Quench." Kuei Han spat a mouthful of blood on the ground. His ferocious beast-like eyes tightened as he stared at Zhang Wu in front of him. Took 2 steps back? 100 years ago, the Sunset Battle God took 1 step back. Therefore, even though Kuei Han was still inferior, the gap between their strength was narrowing. In another 100 years, I hope you can still stand in front of me like today, Kuei Han said. If he fell, Zhang Wu would no longer be the Sunset Battle God, because the Sunset Summit would have a new master. Humph! Zhuge Xiu sneered. He was a bit arrogant. However, Kuei Han was indeed strong, stronger than him and the battle tower. If he wasn't afraid of the 4 guys in the Divine Martial Hall, he might have dared to fight the Sunset Battle God openly and let the 5 Realm Emperors witness the battle. The death of Sword Elder Qing Shuang and Sword Master Wen Qing is good news. Back then, the 12 of them besieged Dendi. This is what they deserved. In addition, Qin Hao disappeared for 20 years. The death of these 2 is the first step of his revenge. Zhang Wu ignored Kuei Han's provocation. It was as if losing the title of Sunset Battle God was not important. He only did it for 1 person. What's the next step? Zhang Lo asked. In your opinion, what do you think Denda's next move will be? His foster father traveled between the Dao Peak and the North Sea to find out the whereabouts of Qin Hao from Bao. After all, Battle Tower sent Denda away with a palm strike 20 years ago, and Denda left. No one knew where the deserted island would be when the deities were buried. Moreover, Qin Hao would not let anyone know. Now, in Denda's eyes, the Sunset Battle God was an enemy. Phoenix Flower 9 Veins and 100 Spirits Island. Zhang Wu pondered. Then, another thought flashed through his mind. It's more likely to be the Qilin Dao sect in the south. Bao's situation was very unstable. Since Qin Hao chose to come back, he would definitely go and see his daughter because he had too many worries in his heart. However, Zhang Wu felt that Qin Hao would not go. Now that the 9 veins of Phoenix Flower and the War God Temple were about to fight, Qin Hao would definitely find help for Bao. The Dao ancestor of the South was undoubtedly a powerful helper. He was definitely Denda's first choice. What should we do? Battle Tower asked. The battle with Phoenix Flower was just an excuse. His foster father's goal was not Bao at all. It was to lure out Dendi. Now that the plan was going smoothly and Dendi had exposed himself, the War God Temple would naturally not really fight with Phoenix Flower. They would definitely target Qin Hao. This was also an excuse not to fight with Phoenix Flower. As long as Qin Hao came out, the War God Temple's priority would be to capture Dendi. The outside world would have nothing to do with it. Go to the Dao sect and block him. Zhang Wu said, see what realm he is at now and whether he has returned to the peak. What if he hasn't? Battle Tower asked. You don't need to go easy on him. He will leave on his own. Zhang Wu was very clear about Qin Hao's style. Being able to kill Sword Elder Blue Frost proved that he had not returned to the peak and was very close to the unblemished realm. If Qin Hao used the Fleetfoot step to leave, Battle Tower might not be able to stop him even if they did not go easy on him. What if he has returned to the peak? Kuei Han asked cautiously. Then congratulations, you can die peacefully in the hands of Second Master Qin. Haha. Zhuge Xiu laughed and slapped her thigh. Bullshit. Kuei Han shouted angrily, his eyes glowing red. It's up to you whether you want to believe it or not. I can't guarantee it in my previous life. But Second Master Qin has recultivated and battled with Meng Xiang. Meng Xiang didn't gain the slightest bit of advantage. Don't you know how powerful Dendi is now? Zhuge Xiu said, in any case, I will not go to the Dao sect. If Qin Hao's cultivation really returned to the peak, he would be in danger without the Sunset Bao. The War God Temple was his enemy on the surface, but Zhang Wu had been secretly helping him and guiding him. In other words, They could hold back their strength against Qin Hao, but they would have to face Denda's full strength. This risk was not a joke. Zhuge Xiu would definitely not do a losing deal. After all, they were gambling with their lives. They could not afford to lose. Kuei Han, you go with Battle Tower. Both of you. Zhan Wu said, after some consideration. Okay. Battle Tower nodded with a solemn expression. He also knew that Qin Hao's strength was definitely not the same as when he was in the God Burial Valley. Recalling the evil aura that covered his body, it was indeed terrifying. Okay, but if he is not as strong as me, I will kill him. Kuei Han stretched out his thick arms. A blood-red cloak flew up from the ground. He put it on roughly and strode out of the hall. He could lose but not win? Kuei Han would not agree. Watch him, Zhan Wu said to Battle Tower with a dissatisfied expression. Kuei Han was getting more and more arrogant. Battle Tower nodded lightly and turned to follow behind Kuei Han. Zhuge Xiu, who was leaning on the huge window frame, smiled foolishly at the two of them. He hoped that they could return in one piece from this trip to the squatting Dao Mountain. Swish! A shadow fell towards Zhuge Xiu. He raised his hand and caught it. When he looked down, he saw a strange-looking token. He turned the token around and saw words printed on it. Mystic Dragon Mountain. Within 2 months, I want to know the Mystic Dragon Divine Lord's secret absolute art. Zhan Wu ordered. Understood. Zhuge Xiu held the token tightly. He stood up and jumped down from the huge window of the hall. Was the Mystic Dragon Divine Lord another dead person who was about to die? Chapter 1866. Mount Qilin was the territory of the Tao ancestor, and Uncle knew that it was not just for show. Zhan Wu ordered the battle tower to keep an eye on Kuei Han. He was not worried that Qin Hao would meet with any mishap. Whether Dendi returned to his peak or not, Qin Hao would not meet with any mishap. On the other hand, Kuei Han had acted recklessly and would pay a huge price. Unless he had no other choice, Zhan Wu did not want to abandon a flawless great emperor who had followed him for a long time. If he really died, he would let Kuei Han die in a more valuable place. Zhuge Xiu went to Mount Qianlong to ask about the Emperor of Qianlong. Regarding the Emperor of Qianlong, Zhan Wu felt that this person was also one of the 12 villains. It's getting closer. Zhan Wu looked at the empty hall and muttered to himself. It was as if he could see the scene of his meeting with Dendi in the future. A smile appeared on his face, and his eyes were filled with anticipation. Being reborn in Western Liang was not Dendi's first reincarnation. The first 2 failures caused Qin Hao to pay the price of his soul, causing him to forget many things. In this life, Zhan Wu would not allow another failure. If he could not find Qin Hao's original appearance, Dendi would be completely annihilated. The remaining soul power would not be able to support the 4th reincarnation of the heavenly axiom. He was confident that he could help Qin Hao get through this crisis, and the Temple of Void would be the key. Everything was going according to Zhan Wu's expectations. Qingji Han could not affect the situation, but the person who gathered the 12 villains made him worried. He did not know why this person attacked Qin Hao, and what his goal was. Southern Land, Mount Qilin. When the burial god ruins opened, Uncle Zhan Wu closed the mountain for 20 years. He reversed the great way of yin and yang and set up a Qian Kuan formation, isolating the mountain of Dao from the outside world. Now that the Path Mountain had reopened, a gate had been opened, opening up a passage to the outside world. Not long ago, warriors from Nanjiang City had seen several sacred palace empresses flying out of the Path Mountain and heading towards the Northland. At this moment, a tall figure in a black robe with his head covered was slowly making his way into the depths of the Mountain of the Way. Following the winding stone path forward, powerful ripples of the power of the Matrix radiated from the vast mountain range. Ordinary people might not be able to sense it, but the stronger one's cultivation, the more they could feel the terror of the power of the Matrix. Qin Hao advanced according to the route in his memory. Perhaps because there was no one to take care of it, the periphery of Dao Mountain was very desolate. The shrubs were messy, and weeds half the height of a person covered the mountain path. After walking for a long time, he finally arrived at the outer gate of Dao Mountain. Qin Hao raised his head and looked around. Streams of formation energy swirled around the space, blocking his vision. He couldn't see the Sword Valley, the Herb Garden, the Spirit Pagoda, and so on. Everything that entered his eyes was very blurry. However, when traces of flame patterns appeared in his eyes, everything became very clear. The buildings in his memory appeared one after another, and he could even see the disciples playing in the mountains. Stop! This is not a place where you can step in at will. Two auras appeared, and soon two figures appeared above Qin Hao's head. The disciples of Dao Mountain, guarding the formation gate, flew into the air on their swords. They stared at him with sharp eyes and warned him, "I'm here to visit the mountain." Qin Hao said softly, "There is no mountain to see. Please go back." One of the disciples with a long sword instrument drove him away. Qin Hao ignored them and stepped forward, directly walking towards the open formation gate. He had come into contact with the Taoist master's law and knew a little about it. Even without the 10,000 spirit fire eyes, he could still determine the correct position of the formation gate according to the direction of the spatial formation energy flow. The two disciples couldn't help but be surprised. Could it be that this person had identified the formation gate? In the next moment, they directly took action. At the same time, they formed sword gestures with their hands. Orange lights surged over their bodies, and streams of saint-level sword chi light fell on the path Qin Hao was going. Qin Hao turned a blind eye, allowing the sword light to fall and dissipate above his head. His footsteps were getting closer and closer to the formation gate. An expert! Stop! The two disciples shouted in surprise. Ignoring their attacks, this person's cultivation was obviously much stronger than theirs. Buzz! At this moment, there was a turbulent sound in front of Qin Hao. A domineering and powerful palm force came out from the formation gate. It came from inside and passed through the space, landing a heavy blow on Qin Hao's chest. It was only then that Qin Hao's black robe began to flutter wildly. What? How is this possible? The two disciples guarding the formation gate saw this scene, and their shocked expressions turned into panic. They naturally knew who had attacked. It was Nie Sippo of the Sacred Palace, an Emperor Dao expert. However, when the palm hit Qin Hao, other than his black robe fluttering, there were no signs of injury. How strong was this person? Was he an imperial lord? We haven't seen each other for 20 years. Nie Sippo's air-striking palm technique has improved. The black robe stopped fluttering, and Qin Hao spoke under the heavy hood. In front of him, a noble woman stood rooted to the ground, her face gradually turning pale. "You can't recognize me?" Qin Hao slowly lifted the hood. It seemed that the incident back then had not left a deep impression on Nie Sippo. The silver hair of the figure in front of her was flowing, and his facial features were firm as if he had walked out from a dream. Nie Sippo held back the scream in her throat as her expression changed rapidly. She quickly went forward and grabbed Qin Hao before entering the formation gate. The two of them flew towards the main peak's Dao Hall. "It's you." Nie Sippo's heart trembled, but her voice was still trembling. "Disappointed?" Qin Hao smiled. No. I don't dare." Nie Sippo was nervous and terrified. "Call Dong and Qing over. I'll wait in the Dao Hall. Don't alert the other disciples." Qin Hao said. He used the divine steps and left Nie Sippo's side in an instant. His aura disappeared from the main peak. Nie Sippo did not dare to delay. She turned around and headed towards the Valley of Swords. Now, Dong was the Valley Lord of the Valley of Swords and was in charge of teaching the disciples of the Dao Mountain. Qing was in charge of the Herb Garden and was the owner of the Herb Garden. Soon, auras gushed out from various parts of the Dao Mountain and flew towards the main peak. This scene confused many disciples. They looked at the elders who had turned into flowing lights and gathered in the Dao Hall. They did not know what had happened in between. At this moment, Qin Hao stepped into the Dao Hall. What entered his eyes was the familiar scenery. He was instantly filled with emotions. "You're back." A voice that he had not heard for a long time sounded in the hall. As the space fluctuated, A handsome middle-aged man in his 40s with a crane hairstyle stood in front of Qin Hao. Bo Changji was wearing a white Dao robe. He looked at him with a smile and said, "The time is shorter than I predicted. It seems that even the Dao ancestor has times when he is not accurate." Ha ha. Both of them laughed heartily and carefreely. 20 years ago, before the Tribulation Sword Emperor entered the sect, the Dao ancestor gave him a forward maxim. He also said that he would never meet Qin Hao again. At that time, he predicted that Qin Hao would need at least 100 years to cross the true self realm and enter the unblemished Great Path. This was still an early calculation. At that time, Bo Changji knew that his time was up. However, 20 years later, Qin Hao stepped out of the true self realm and regained control of the unblemished Dili. This was beyond the Dao ancestors' expectations. It was truly admirable and impressive. I am cultivating the unblemished Great Path. It's just going with the flow, Qin Hao said modestly. As the first core disciple of the Divine Palace, he was the focus of cultivation. The Seven Peaks had built 9 unblemished emperor foundations for him. Moreover, he had accumulated martial arts cultivation in his previous life, so his cultivation speed was naturally faster than ordinary people. The so-called ordinary people were, of course, the top geniuses of the 4 regions. Not bad. Bo Changji nodded gently. One figure after another landed at the entrance of the hall. Sect Master Yu Biechio, Deputy Sect Master Shi Yongyan, Bo Shang, Master Pharmacist Elder Yu, Shi Ichi, Martial Pavilion Bo Sameo, Link Pagoda Zhang Qing, and many other faces walked into the hall. The Water Jade Emperor Wu Yu, Tai Hua, Holy Palace Elder Tian Yun, First Holy Maiden Qianning, and others were also here. Then, Qin Hao saw the 2 most familiar faces, Shi Dong and Yin Qingqing. Master. Shi Dong's appearance hadn't changed much. He looked more mature. Perhaps it was because of the spirit herbs, but Qingqing had changed a little. Her healthy, wheat-colored skin exuded a rich luster. Although the outline of her face was the same, her facial features were more delicate. Looking at her like this, Qingqing exuded a holy and dignified temperament. When the 2 saw Qin Hao, they immediately knelt down at the same time. Yin Qingqing hugged Qin Hao's thigh and cried. Her crying was heart-wrenching. "You've grown so big. Don't you want to save some face for yourself?" Qin Hao smiled kindly and pulled them up. He looked at his 2 disciples carefully and said, "Third tier Dao Vindication, middle level Renhuang. Not bad." At that time, the Eastern Sky's talent was extremely high. He had been taught by the spiritual ancestor, and now he had entered the Emperor's path. Qingqing's talent was limited. Naturally, she couldn't compare with Shi Dong. A girl from an ordinary hunter's family could cultivate to become an empress. It could be imagined that she must have suffered a lot in cultivation. It's not enough. I want to become an emperor and avenge master. Yin Qingqing's face was full of tears. She gritted her teeth and growled. That year, the news from the Valley of the Burial Gods spread to the southern land. The battle tower led troops to the Mountain of the Way. When she heard the news of Qin Hao's death, she almost collapsed. She relied on the motivation of revenge to support herself until now. Because of this, even her personality changed. From a girl who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and laughed all day long, she learned to endure and calculate. She began to look for flaws in her opponent's character. What revenge? I'm not dead. Qin Hao scratched Qingqing's nose. Master, what happened back then? Are you really Dendi? Shi Dong asked. At this moment, everyone's expression was the same. Only Shi Dong still had doubts about Qin Hao's identity. He really didn't dare to believe it. Yes. Qin Hao nodded and said, "We'll talk about this later. I came here to discuss something important with the spiritual ancestor and everyone else." The daughter of the 3 island lords of the Phoenix Flower Island in the north is actually your flesh and blood. You came back because of this, the spiritual ancestor said. The Dao ancestor said. Qin Hao smiled bitterly. In front of you, I don't even have to explain. In the eyes of a diviner, there were no secrets. It was unbelievable. Seeing your spiritual ancestor, you made a divination. Because of this, I ordered Qianning to bring people to the north to verify it. However, that woman Yunro blocked us and didn't allow Qianning to see Bao the Empress of Water Jade said. The divination showed the result, but it was still a divination. She had to verify it with her own eyes. If Qianning saw Bao Er's Dao flame and the evil power in the outside world, the Dao sect and the sacred palace would dare to make a move. However, Yunro didn't allow her to see Bao Your daughter is still unconscious. From Island Lord Yunro's tone, it seems like her condition isn't too good. The 9-pulse martial arts sparring competition has caused her sequelae. She probably wants to protect her daughter, so she doesn't want us to see her. Qianning told Qin how everything she knew. You verified your Dao and become the Arch. Not bad. Qin Hao changed the topic and saw through Qianning's cultivation. Chapter 1867. Qin Hao's gaze made Qianning feel uncomfortable. Was he praising her or insulting her? Back when they came out of the burial god relic, the Holy Palace had given all the resources to Qianning to help her prove her Dao so that she could become Shui Yao's successor. In the past 20 years, Qianning had worked hard to cultivate. She didn't dare to slack off at all. Although the Holy Palace had used up a lot of resources, it was also because of Qianning's hard work. After all, she was very talented. However, compared to Qin Hao, 20 years ago, Qin Hao could compete with the true self-emperor. Qianning's cultivation was nothing in front of him. Don't you want to go to Phoenix Flower to see your daughter? Bo Changji asked with a smile. Qin Hao sighed slightly. I want to. Before that, I have more urgent things to do. Before Bao was born, Qin Hao had already merged with the evil fetus. His bloodline power was passed to Bao The 9-pulse martial arts symposium forced out the evil power hidden in Bao body. It was normal for her to feel uncomfortable for the first time. After all, not everyone could withstand the power of 10,000 evil. It could easily drive people crazy. Qin Hao believed that Bao could withstand it. She could slowly familiarize herself with the evil power until she could control it freely. With this thought in mind, Qin Hao laughed. He remembered Shi Ming's words. The evil power and dragon power were both divine path powers. The two couldn't coexist. If Bao awakened the evil power, she would miss the dragon power. That was good. Otherwise, a girl with scales all over her body would look strange. You brat. What urgent matter is more important than your daughter's health? The great elder said with a smile. Life or death? Qin Hao's expression became serious. He stood up from his seat and looked around at everyone. Bao is burdened by me. The war god temple wants to take her to the sunset peak. That day, Elder Feng Hua died because of this. I came to Mountain of the Way to ask for help. We've heard that Senior Feng Qi's time has come to an end. His short battle with the battle tower caused his sovereign spirit to dry up prematurely. Afterwards, Feng Lan issued a supreme order, and all the disciples of the 9 branches returned to fight against the war god temple to protect Yunbao Oh, I'm sorry. Empress Shui Yao smiled at Qin Hao. The foundation of the Phoenix Flower sect is very strong, and the disciples of the 9 branches are spread throughout the 9,000 minor Dao worlds of the 4 regions. Their strength is much greater and more complicated than you can imagine, but I don't think they can stop the war god temple. Qin Hao's expression was extremely serious. No one in the world understood Zhan Wu and Zhan Wu's power better than he did. You want Dao Mountain to send troops to the north? The Dao ancestor asked. Senior, please help me. Qin Hao cupped his hands. Feng Lan couldn't stop the 3 commanders of the battle tower, let alone the sunset war god who held the sunset divine Bao. Bo Changji didn't reply. Instead, he looked at Empress Water Jade. How are we supposed to block it? Shui Yao smiled bitterly. There's no need for the sacred palace to face the enemy head-on. We just need to hold them back, Qin Hao said. On the battlefield, the 9 branches of the Phoenix Flower sect and the many forces with deep ties to the Phoenix Flower sect would pull them back. What he needed was the help of Empress Shui Yao and the Dao ancestor. It was easy for the imperial lords to suppress the emperors who had proven their Dao. Shui Yao could fight against 10 of them, let alone the Tao ancestor. If a flawless emperor didn't appear, who could cross the Tao mountain? Bo Changji's strength was obvious to all in the East Continent. 1,000 years ago, he had defeated a generation in the South, which was already very terrifying. However, the most powerful thing about the Tao ancestor was that he could reverse yin and yang. Even the battle tower couldn't break into the Tao mountain. If he appeared, no one in the 100 Spirits Island could break through. Of course, now Qianning was also a force that couldn't be underestimated. That was why Qin Hao had teased her just now. 2 imperial lords, 1 flawless great emperor, and more than 10 emperors from a sacred palace. To a large extent, they could share the pressure of the battle tower. If the Tao ancestor made a move, the 3 commanders of the War God Temple would be wary. Okay, Bo Changji nodded directly. His straightforwardness surprised Qin Hao a little. Actually, the Tao ancestor has already made preparations to let Qianning go to the North Territory. He just needs to confirm Bao Er's identity. If she is really your daughter, once the War God Temple and Phoenix Flower start fighting, we will wait for the opportunity to attack the Sunset Peak. Shui Yao said. She was just testing Qin Hao's attitude. Attack the Sunset Peak? Qin Hao was shocked by this move. Haha, although I'm old and my cultivation is not at its peak, I'm still very confident that I can exchange a few blows with the strongest emperor in the 4 regions. Bo Changji said softly. Bo Changji said softly, a look of anticipation on his face. Back then, when the Gui tribe came to Tao Mountain to fight, he had reached the Eastland with a thought and descended on Sunset Peak. Bo Changji knew the cultivation level of the Sunset were immortal. If they really fought, he might not be able to defeat him. Even if he was at his peak, his chances of winning were very low. Even so, Bo Changji still wanted to try. After all, in his hands, except for Dong Tian and Shermu, who had died young, Tao Zhu had never met a qualified opponent in his life. Thank you, Senior. Qin Hao bowed slightly. It was too crazy to attack the root of the problem directly. In this way, the War God Temple would definitely be in chaos on the battlefield in the North Territory. You are too humble. Bo Changji smiled. Qin Hao should know very well that he wouldn't just stand by and watch. He had also guessed that he would agree to help this time. Qin Hao grinned and looked at the handsome middle-aged man with white hair in front of him. It was as if he was possessed by the Eastern Sky's eldest senior brother. His heart was suddenly filled with warmth. All right, you can go do what you need to do. I will discuss the specific details with Empress Shui Yao. When the time comes, we will split up or move together. You don't have to worry about Bao Er's safety. Bo Changji got up and said, Be careful. Zhan Wu has a powerful Dharma artifact. Qin Hao said with a tense expression. How is it compared to the Dream Branch? The Tao ancestor asked. The first-generation patriarch of the Phoenix Flower sect had become famous before the Tao ancestor. He had heard of the Dream Branch. It is not weak at all, Qin Hao said very seriously. Then I have to be even more careful in this battle. However, I also have a Dharma artifact. Uncle Bo smiled carelessly and waved his hand at Qin Hao, indicating that they could leave. Master, I will go to the 100 Spirits Island and protect Bao Er. Unless I die, there will be no one by her side. Save it. With your cultivation level, you won't be able to beat the imperial servants of the 3 commanders of the War Immortal Guards. Besides, you won't be able to enter the 100 Spirits Island. Qin Hao raised his hand and rubbed Sherdong's head. Everyone, please be careful. I will remember this kindness in my heart. I will take my leave first. Qin Hao pulled the hood over his head. Wait, don't you want to test my cultivation level now? Shui Yao hurriedly got up and said. No, Qin Hao said and slowly turned his face. Because I'm not interested. Ha ha ha. The true self, great emperor, Shui Yao, had finally stepped out of the hurdle that she had always dreamed of. Unfortunately, she couldn't withstand a single blow from Qin Hao. It was boring. Junior 3, why did you suppress the power of your Tao intent and not completely release it? At this moment, the Tao ancestor asked. May I ask, Senior, what is flawless? Qin Hao understood what the Tao ancestor meant. He was indeed suppressing his emperor intent so that it wouldn't converge with the heavenly way. In this way, it couldn't be counted as truly flawless. After recultivating, Qin Hao's 3 souls in one body, rules, and martial arts cultivation method were all different from his previous life. He couldn't break through according to the previous method. Now, he had a brand new body of martial arts. He was trying to break through the limit and walk a different path from his previous life. Therefore, he was puzzled. Haha, there's no such thing as truly flawless in the world. Even the heavenly way has flaws and cracks. Why are all things divided into strong and weak? The Emperor's Tao you created can't be perfect either. Look, it's only relative. The so-called flawless great Tao is that I am invincible when I observe the world. This is flawless, the Tao ancestor said. A light flashed through Qin Hao's mind. The puzzlement in his heart suddenly became clear. Then, he bowed again and strode out of the hall. There was no such thing as truly flawless. When one observed the world, one was invincible. Senior, are you joking with him? Shui Yao stood in the hall in a daze. The Tao ancestor was explaining to Dendi. That guy had entered the flawless great Tao in his previous life. Although the Tao ancestor's seniority was higher, there was no need for Uncle Changji to explain to Dendi. When you encounter another obstacle in your cultivation, you will understand. Bo Changji smiled meaningfully, turned around, and left with a sage-like demeanor, leaving behind a group of disciples and emperors of the sacred palace in the hall. Qin Hao used the fleet-foot steps and quietly left the Tao gate. After listening to Uncle Changji's words, he felt that his emperor's body and spiritual soul were lighter than usual. It was as if his body was about to return to nothingness. His breath blended into the great Tao bit by bit. The power of the flames of the way, the chi of the dragon's soul, the rules, and so on all extended toward the heavenly way that people feared but couldn't see. There was no such thing as flawless in the world. Even the heavenly way had cracks and loopholes. The words of the Tao ancestor were the truth. When one observed the world, one was invincible. The strength of all things was relative. Thinking about it carefully, wasn't this the Emperor's way that the Divine Palace pursued? The 7 peaks of the Divine Palace made the Emperor's foundation deeper and stronger than the warriors of the outside world by 1 or 2 times. In the eyes of the warriors of the outside world, the disciples of the Divine Palace were perfect. There were no flaws in the way. Perhaps the Tao ancestor will be stronger than the Emperor's way of the eastern sky when he goes to the Divine Palace. Qin Hao came out of the matrix door and walked forward. He joked. Fortunately, Uncle Changji had been captured. Otherwise, Qin Hao couldn't imagine if the evil soul would change again after refining the Tao ancestor. The mountain and river diagram of the eastern sky accommodated all things and guided all things for his own use. Shermu controlled the power of the Great Path Galaxy. Compared to them, the Tao ancestor's reversal of Yin and Earth was not so good. It seemed to be harmless, but its effect was so strong that Qin Hao felt it was against the natural order and was afraid. If the evil soul swallowed the Tao ancestor, would it be inspired in martial arts and even change its personality? Qin Hao's body trembled. He threw away this unrealistic idea. The evil soul was already very difficult to deal with. He didn't want to encounter a monster that could peek into the way of heaven and see through everything. Old Blue Frost and Nun Winching are dead. There are no clues about the rest of the 12 villains. I can't show up publicly for the time being. If I want to relieve the pressure on Feng Lan, the Tao ancestor alone is not enough. Qin Hao thought, if he showed up, the East Continent would be in a panic again. Although it could delay the danger of the 9 meridians to a certain extent, it would also make the other villains more vigilant. It would be more difficult to hunt down the person behind the Matrix. Well, I'll have to kill him sooner or later. Before the war in the North Territory, if the Yuntian Palace and the EC are in chaos, Zhan Wu will definitely guess that I did it. Qin Hao had a plan for the next step. He had to kill either Great Ancestor Yuntian or Great Ancestor Hantian. In terms of choice, it seemed more appropriate to attack the Yi clan. After all, the Shuo clan of the EC could help Qin Hao. Moreover, the Shuo clan and the Yi clan were fighting now. They just lacked some strength and couldn't break into the Yi clan's nest. Shuo Xiu's family needed help. Chapter 1868. Qin Hao naturally could not personally help the Shuo clan. Xiao Han and Wei Wei were also not suitable. They had to find other ways to help them. Standing high in the sky, his deep eyes followed the Dao mountain towards the boundless space in the south. It was as if he had reached the end of the world, the southern region. The southern region's Knight Luo Palace, Zheng clan, and Sword Sect would become the strongest helpers of a Shuo clan. If the three sects joined the war in the Eastern Sea, it would be easy to overturn the Gui clan. Gui clan's old ancestor Han Tian and Shuo clan's old ancestor Duo Hai had similar cultivation. Due to this, old ancestor Duo Hai did not dare to fight head-on. If several Dao confirming emperors came to help, old ancestor Duo Hai would not have to worry anymore. Even if they were defeated, the Shuo clan would be able to escape unscathed. The problem was that the southern region was not peaceful. I have said that if the god Burial Valley does not die, Ningwu will not exist in this world. Qin Hao's eyes flashed with sharpness. In front of the god Burial Palace, Ning Tianqing provoked Xiao Han and forced her to have no way out. Back then, the five realm emperors witnessed it. What could Xiao Han do? She could only die with Qin Hao. It was time to settle this score with Ning Tianqing. Qin Hao always had a complicated feeling towards Ning Tianqing. Perhaps it was because of the elegant youth at the Golden Light City's auction. Or perhaps it was because he was a gentleman who faced thousands of troops in Feng City to keep his promise. In short, unless there was no other choice, he did not want to meet Ning Tianqing in a life and death situation. Unfortunately, Ning Tianqing's ambition pushed the two people who were originally on the same path further and further apart. In the end, they went in opposite directions. A person's heart was unpredictable. Sometimes, those who left a good first impression and left a good impression would make you feel disgusted as time went by. There were also some people who were not good at first, but slowly discovered later that they were not bad. For example, Zhou Wudao. Perhaps Qin Hao and Ning Tianqing were originally not the same kind of people. However, due to the constraints of the current situation, the two who originally walked different paths were forcibly united together. Following the collapse of the imperial power of the fifth branch of Ning Tianqing, the two who walked different paths eventually returned to their original positions. Qin Hao returned to his original heart, and so did Ning Tianqing. From Ning Tianqing's point of view, he wasn't wrong. After all, he was born to be an ambitious person who wanted to control the world. He was also fighting for his dreams and pursuits. Unfortunately, his ambition hurt Qin Hao. It's been 20 years. With Wu's ability, he should have stepped into the true self Emperor Dao by now. The sharpness in Qin Hao's eyes gradually faded. A smile returned to his lips. He stepped forward with the fleet-foot stride and headed towards Western Liang. The time left for him was very tight. In half a month, the War God Temple would arrive in the North Territory. Qin Hao wanted to call for reinforcements from the southern region. First, he had to calm the chaos in the southern region. After that, the Sword Sect of the southern region, the Knight Luo Palace, and the emperors of the Zheng tribe could rush to the East Continent. Naturally, Caiogua, Yi Shuihan, and the others could not be left out of this battle. However, at this moment, a strong sense of danger invaded his soul. Qin Hao's stride paused as he looked toward a certain spot in the void. He saw traces of lightning flickering faintly at that spot. Very soon, the space was filled with lightning. An incomparably terrifying will of the Wei interweaved into a sea of lightning. An incomparably strong figure slowly walked out from the sea of lightning. This person was bare-chested and wore a red cloak. Under his expressionless face, muscles as hard as rock could be seen, exuding a terrifying sense of violence. Kuei Han. Qin Hao naturally recognized this person. He was one of the three commanders of the War God Guards under Zhang Wu. His cultivation was once stronger than the other two. 600 years ago, Qin Hao pacified the barbarians and established the Daqin Empire. Kuei Han became famous as a martial maniac. His pair of lightning fists were stained with the blood of countless cultivators. At this moment, Wu Kuang blocked Qin Hao's path, and there was more than one person blocking his way. Screech. The ear-piercing cry of the golden crow resounded through the 9 heavens. Then, a dazzling and mighty golden war god chariot rolled over, crushing the void and causing the great path to rumble. On the chariot, Zhang Lu was wearing divine armor and holding a large battle sword. He was like a war god that had descended from the 9 heavens. In an instant, this part of the world was sealed by an incomparably terrifying power of the will of the way. Traces of lightning and light wandered about, and the space was filled with the power of the golden crow's powerful flames of the way. Qin Hao couldn't help but change his expression slightly. He felt the will of the way emanating from these two people. They were both flawless. Kuei Han's will of the emperor was even more powerful than Zhang Lu's. It had reached the flawless, great accomplishment. This was the peak power of Qin Hao's previous life. "I've been waiting for you for a long time," Zhang Lu said in a deep voice. 9 golden crows surrounded the chariot, and their aura was boundless. "In the end, I was discovered by you." Qin Hao put away the vigilance on his face and smiled faintly. The deaths of Qing Shuang and Wenqing Nun had probably alarmed the war god guards that the Sunset War God had set up in the 5 realms. However, he didn't expect that Zhang Wu would act so quickly and accurately wait for him at Chila Mountain. It seemed that he had expected Qin Hao to come here. Zhang Wu was indeed the person who knew him best. "I'll give you 2 choices. 1, come back with us. 2, die. You know my temper. I don't talk nonsense with others." Kuei Han walked towards Qin Hao in the void. The radiance of the Way of Thunder circled around his body. His voice was irresistible. Qin Hao looked at Kuei Han and curled his lips. "You're just a lowly slave. Do you think you can do that? You know my temper. I hate being threatened. Then you can die." Kuei Han didn't have much hope in Qin Hao. How could Denda follow their will? At this moment, Kuei Han's thick legs ran wildly in the air. The ferocious strength of his feet caused a great path of space to crack inch by inch. The ground below shook. He reached out his hand and pulled out a giant hammer from the void. Terrifying lightning circled around it. The hammer pointed at Qin Hao. Boom, crack, crack. An unparalleled thunder of the great path struck out. It tore everything apart and spread wildly towards Qin Hao. Qin Hao's black robe billowed. A current of sword will rose around him. The current grew stronger and stronger. He pointed his finger forward. An incomparably dazzling light condensed. A ray of extremely sharp light shot out. The art of endless samsara in his body was activated. The tearing precepts merged into it. The ray of light pierced through the great path of thunder and disintegrated it. Sword come. Qin Hao didn't give his opponent a chance to attack. He went from passive to active because he knew that it was impossible for him to win against 2 unblemished cultivators. Endless light of sword will bathed his body. The red lotus imperial soul burned. The blood-red demonic flames gradually turned black. His hands changed the sword sign. The will of the emperor rose and resonated with heaven and earth. Countless great path sword flows fell. The blade spewed out the power of dark flames. They stabbed around Kuei Han and trapped him like a sword prison. At this moment, Kuei Han was trapped in more than 100 flaming sword chi. He was firmly trapped. The flaming divine swords exploded with terrifying flames of the way. Wrapped in Qin Hao's power of rules, they burned wildly. Like meteors, the flaming currents rushed towards Kuei Han in the center. The 100 swords became one and evolved into a supreme sword matrix. Chapter 1869. The surging black flames gathered madly toward the center, turning into a violent vortex. Kuei Han was trapped by the sword matrix and felt a faint pressure from Qin Hao. At this moment, he was slightly shaken and began to believe what Zhuge Xiu said. If they were at the same level of emperor, Qin Hao definitely had the power to kill him. He knew very well that Dende had not used his full strength yet. Unfortunately, Qin Hao's cultivation had not recovered to its peak. Roar! A wild roar came from his mouth. A monstrous thunder field burst out from Kuei Han's body. The terrifying shadow of the thunder god descended, suppressing the space. Above the sky, endless thunder fell violently, crazily striking the flame vortex. At this moment, Kuei Han had turned into a pure thunder body. Dazzling thunder light wrapped around him, dancing like chains. It was also like a powerful lightning python that crazily devoured the flame vortex, tearing it apart and shattering it. Break! With a deafening boom, the flame vortex that surrounded Kuei Han collapsed, revealing his domineering body. He took a step forward fiercely, rushing forward like a thunder beast. He punched out a beam of thunder light, directly piercing through Qin Hao's chest. The violent thunder blew Denda's entire body apart. Bastard! Kuei Han cursed angrily. What he hit was not flesh and blood, but an afterimage. He suddenly turned around. At this moment, he saw a figure disappear into the spatial crack from afar. Qin Hao's aura disappeared from the world at an incredible speed. He had escaped. Kuei Han's body trembled with anger. He gritted his teeth and glared at Zhang Lu on the Golden Crow's chariot. He roared, "Are you just going to watch him escape?" Just now, Dindi used the water-wind godly steps. Kuei Han was not good at movement techniques, so there was no possibility of catching up. Zhang Lu, on the other hand, knew many of Denda's secret techniques. The godly steps and the golden finger were second to none. If Zhang Lu stopped him, Qin Hao would not have escaped so easily. At that moment, Zhang Lu was standing on the chariot and didn't pay attention to Kuei Han. He coldly stared behind Kuei Han, where there was another figure. Kuei Han turned around again and saw a handsome middle-aged man in white Taoist robes with his hair tied up in a crown looking at him. The Emperor Qi coming from him was no weaker than Kuei Han's. That's right. Why didn't the young master of the war, God Temple, intervene? Bo Changji asked the Golden Crow chariot. They had fought each other 20 years ago, so they were not strangers. Will the Tao ancestor do as I wish? Zhanlo asked with a calm face. Bo Changji smiled and flicked the dust in his hand. His body was enveloped by Emperor light as he flew back to the Qilin Dao Mountain. Naturally, he would not let the War Tower do as they wished. If they continued to fight, the Tao ancestor would accompany them to the end. Damn it! Kuei Han became even angrier. Not only did the battle tower not stop Dendi, they even let Bo Changji be so arrogant and let him come and go as he pleased. If you're not convinced with the Tao ancestor, you can go and give it a try. Zhanlo said. Oomph. Kuei Han snorted coldly. His feet shook the void as he headed towards the Qilin mountain range. Rumble. Not long after, a layer of earth-shattering thunder appeared in the sky above Mount Dao. The incomparably violent movement shook the entire Nanjiang region crazily. The mountains within a radius of thousands of miles collapsed. Nanjiang City, which was closest to it, had terrifying ravines crisscrossing across it, dividing the entire city into several pieces of uneven size. Kuei Han immediately returned. When he returned, his cloak was broken in half, and there were several sword scars on his face, with traces of blood flowing. His head was buzzing from the impact of the array. When he saw Zhanlo, he felt that it was unnecessary to even speak, so he directly left and tore the space apart to head towards the East Land. Today, he had lost all face and gained nothing. Not only did he fail to capture Qin Hao, but he also couldn't touch the Tao ancestor. For Wu Kuang, who advocated martial arts, it was undoubtedly a failure and shame, a stain on his life. Zhanlo calmly watched Kuei Han leave. Before he came, the result was already within his expectations. His adoptive father had asked him to watch Kuei Han. If he had really blocked Qin Hao, then there would have been a life-and-death battle between Dendi and the Tao ancestor. Sometimes being too strong is the biggest weakness, Zhanlo said coldly. He raised his hand on the sword hilt and looked at his palm. At this time, two words gradually appeared on his palm, becoming clearer and clearer. Southern region. This. In the void, Qin Hao covered a distance of 10,000 miles with a single step as he advanced towards western Liang. A faint lightning luster flickered in front of his chest, leaving behind a faint rule will. He couldn't help but gasp. I haven't seen Kuei Han for 600 years, but he has grown so strong. Unblemished upper mastery was on par with Qin Hao's cultivation in his previous life. This strength was absolutely unmatched in the 4 regions and 5 realms. If he had stayed to fight just now, it would have been very risky. Qin Hao naturally knew that the Tao ancestor would appear to help, but it was meaningless to fight like that. He had to solve the 9 veins of the phoenix flower as soon as possible. His time was limited. Qin Hao heard that Wuk had been stationed in western Liang. He had set up a Taoist peak in Luoshui to protect the land of western Liang for him and prevent Ning Wu from crossing the sea. This friendship could be witnessed by heaven and earth. First, meet up with Wuk, go to the southern region to destroy Ning Wu, and then lead the battlefield to the East Sea. Kuei Han and Zhan Lo appeared at the Mountain of the Way, which made Qin Hao understand that the Sunset Warlord acted very quickly. Zhan Wu knew him very well. He had to get rid of the hidden danger in the southern region before the other party guessed his next move. It's been 20 years. Brothers, long time no see. Stepping on the sky, Qin Hao constantly tore through space and moved forward. He was getting closer and closer to western Liang. With the support of his Dilly now, he could travel through space and between the 4 regions in less than a day. Finally, a monstrous Tao might descended on western Luoshui. A huge emperor's will radiated. Qin Hao instantly captured the person on the true extreme Taoist peak. Almost at the same time, Shou Wuk, who was recuperating on the Mountain of the Way, also sensed a powerful emperor's will descend from the sky, enveloping his true extreme sword peak. Shou Wuk's closed eyes suddenly opened. The sword will of all things swept out. His pupils condensed into noble golden eyes. His gaze was like 2 incomparably sharp divine swords piercing through the clouds. He pointed towards the sky, and an extremely terrifying crack appeared in the boundless sky above the Luoshui Empire. A huge and boundless sword will descended from the 9 heavens. Wuk's will controlled this sword chi of cleaving heaven, blasting it towards Qin Hao. At the same time, a similar sword chi of cleaving heaven flew out from Qin Hao's direction. Wrapped in raging flames, it fell like a meteor sword, colliding with Shou Wuk's huge golden sword. Between heaven and earth, a huge mushroom cloud appeared. The ground of western Liang trembled incessantly, and the water of the West Sea surged with huge waves. Countless ships anchored in ports of the Luoshui Empire were overturned by the rising tide. Ha ha ha! At this moment, as the monstrous sword will of different attributes dissipated, 2 bold and unrestrained laughter rang through the land. Chapter 1870. A few days later, a group of experts set off from western Liang and flew towards the southern region. There were 7 people in the group: Qin Hao Wuk, Zhan Zhu, Zhang Guanghe, Northern Frontier Holy Emperor Jiang, and Qin Yun, who had just entered the Emperor realm. In addition, Yi Huan and Qin Qian followed the group. The journey this time was long, and there would be a rare fierce battle with Ning Wu. Naturally, the fewer people accompanying them, the better. Therefore, they should prioritize the strong ones. The Battle of the East Continent and the North Territory was imminent. In order to relieve the great pressure facing Fenghua, Qin Hao's time was extremely tight. In order to prevent Dilly from being exhausted on the journey, he could not bring too many people. Originally, he only wanted to bring Wuk, Holy Emperor Jiang, and Zhang Guanghe. This combat strength was enough to deal with Ning Wu. After all, they still had people in the southern region. However, after returning to western Liang, he discovered that Qin Hao had reached the Tao validation perfection stage and had entered the Emperor realm. This gave Qin Hao a pleasant surprise, so he naturally brought them along. The probability of a life and death battle between overlord forces was extremely small. Every time such a magnificent battle broke out, it was very precious to the cultivation of the Emperor realm. It was just right to use Ning Wu to stabilize Qin Yun's state. Only by experiencing the baptism of blood could one become a true emperor, broadening the emperor intent and enriching the emperor aura. As for Yi Huan and Qin Qian, They had admired Dinda for a long time. Since young, they had been influenced by the legendary experiences of their elders. Dinda was also a god in their parents' mouths. Unfortunately, Qin Hao died too early, and they never got to see him. It was truly an enormous regret. They could only yearn for him every night, hoping to bathe in Qin Hao's glory in their dreams. Now that Qin Hao had returned and was alive and well, he even brought their master, Shou Wuk, to the southern region to destroy the Ningwu Empire. How could they miss such a big scene? Otherwise, they would regret it for the rest of their lives. It was also Yi Shuihan and Akuz pleased that Qin Hao decided to bring 2 juniors to broaden their horizons. It was a pity that Xiaowu missed the opportunity to fight alongside his big brother in this battle. However, Xiaowu was not idle either. When Qin Hao set off, he, Chen Wanqin, Yi Shuihan, and Duan Zhanfei were to disguise themselves and head to Penglai in the Eastern Sea. They would first meet up with the Shuo clan and convey Qin Hao's plan to Shuo Xiu. Once the southern region was settled, the experts would immediately rush over and join forces to attack the Sky Shaker clan's lair. It's too rushed. You should stay a few more days to accompany your adoptive parents and Uncle Xiao. The Emperor's light around Shou Wuk exploded and surged. He condensed the sword will of all things and rode on his sword, shuttling through space quickly with the others. Behind him, Qin Qian buried her head in his back and hugged her master's waist tightly. She was so scared that her face turned pale. She closed her eyes and did not dare to open them. At this time, Qin Hao was also riding on his sword. He stepped on the Taishu divine sword and brought out an extremely long emerald fire shadow behind him. He walked side by side with Shou Wuk. Yi Huan stood behind Qin Hao and closed his eyes, just like Qin Qian. He hugged Qin Hao's waist tightly and made a strange sound from his throat. The terrifying sound rang in his ears. He felt as if his scalp was being blown away by the wind. If not for the protection of Qin Hao's dilly, perhaps his entire body would have been cut into several pieces by the space cracks in the impact. It was too terrifying. His father, Yi Shuihan, Uncle Gua, and even his grandfather, Yi Longyuan, could not compare to this level of cultivation. The great emperor of true self was so terrifying. Moreover, Yi Huan faintly felt that Qin Hao's hidden aura was even stronger than his master's. Bao is being closely watched by the 5 realms of the East Continent. Although the 9 meridians are strong, Feng Lan alone cannot stop the 3 commanders. If she is late, my daughter may be gone. Qin Hao was competing against time. No matter how much he missed his parents, he could not stay for long. He believed that his parents and father-in-law would understand him. Reunion was a beautiful word, but if it was in danger, how could Qin Hao be at ease? According to Zhang Wu's understanding of you, he may attack Bao in advance, St. Jiang said. His body was surrounded by the light of the true will of the Great Path. Together with Zhang Guang, he, and Qin Yun, they followed closely behind Qin Hao and Shou Wuk. This is what I am most worried about. Looking at Feng Lan's performance, she is strong enough. It will not be easy for the Temple of War to break through the 9 meridians in one fell swoop. In addition, if I ask the Great Elder to help the North, it will more or less put some pressure on Zhang Wu. Of course, Qin Hao had thought about this. In the periphery of the Mountain of the Way, Kuei Han and the Battle Tower could not catch him. After returning to report, Zhang Wu would definitely change his strategy. At that time, he would attack the North and use Bao Er's life to force Qin Hao to show himself. Therefore, time is even more pressing now. Should we let Elder Zhou go? St. Jiang asked Zhou when he was on his path peak. He had left a wisp of will there. As long as Qin Hao asked, he would immediately tell Zhou when he to go to the Phoenix Flower. There was also Elder Zhou's great-great-grandson, Zhou Wudao. It was unknown what kind of fortune he had obtained in the past, but his cultivation had improved tremendously. At present, he was also a force that could not be underestimated. Do you think Zhou when he dares? Qin Hao said softly. It was not that he looked down on the great Zhou Grandmaster. In all fairness, Elder Zhou could bully the weak, but as long as he met someone of a similar level of cultivation, he would immediately become a coward. It could be seen from the god-slaying formation that was set up 600 years ago. The other villains surrounded Qin Hao with their lives. Only Elder Zhou was submissive and did not attack. Why? He was also afraid that if Qin Hao did not die, he would come back to settle the score with him. Therefore, Zhou Wendy went to the north alone and let him and Feng Lan shoulder the burden to face the three commanders of the battle tower at the same time. Sorry, he did not have the guts. If he did, there would definitely be Qin Hao who came personally. Only when Qin Hao was on the battlefield would Zhou Wendy dare to take the risk together with him. That is indeed the case. Saint Jiang laughed involuntarily. Maybe it was because of his personality. The great Zhou Empire was stuck in the gap between Daqin and Mo Luo. If they were timid and had more misgivings, they would naturally live longer. Why not give it a try? Maybe Zhou Wendy had died long ago. Listen, this is the tone of an unparalleled powerhouse of the older generation. Yi Huan raised his mouth proudly and followed the aura to speak in the direction of Qin Qian. That pair of eyes that were tightly shut, as if they had merged with his face, did not affect his lofty image at all, as if the person who had just commented on the great Zhou Empire's ancestors was him. Qin Qian did not reply. At this moment, she was hugging Shou Wuck tightly. Her mind was spinning, as if she would faint in the next second and let go. The North can only be entrusted to Elder Tao Zhu. Tell me about Ning Wu. It is not as simple as you think to completely eliminate Ning Wu from the southern mountain range. Shou Wuck spoke. Oh, Qin Hao smiled. Tell me about it. Could it be that Ning Tianxing had a strong backing in his hands? Stronger than Qin Hao's cultivation? You know that I never exaggerate, let alone lie. More than a month ago, Ning Wu once again approached the Great Zhang. His army had already crossed the South River and occupied the 7 southern provinces of the Zhang tribe. Guess, where is Ning Tianxing now? Shou Wuck looked at Qin Hao with an incomparably serious expression. Feng City. Qin Hao's words hit the nail on the head. It was the area that the Xianyuan family had once attacked. Now, Feng City was the imperial city of the Great Zhang. It's funny, isn't it? Ning Tianxing once led Ning Wu's army to defeat the Xianyuan family in Feng City. Now, he himself has attacked here. Shou Wuck said coldly, with a hint of sarcasm. Qin Hao suddenly became serious. Feng City was the imperial city of the Zhang tribe. Not only did it symbolize the dignity of the family, but it also had a great significance because Qin Hao had fought a bloody battle to defend this city. In that battle, the former air cavalry of the Union of Cultivators was completely annihilated. For the warriors of the Union of Cultivators, the Great Zhang Empire, and even Qin Hao himself, it had a deep meaning. Now, Ning Tianxing had attacked Feng City. If not for the fact that they could not stop him, Zheng Qinshi would not have allowed Ning Wu's soldiers to trample on this sacred land. This proved that Wuck's words were true. Ning Wu's strength was much stronger than Qin Hao had imagined. Yang Shun was defeated. Even he couldn't stop him. Although he was not injured, fortunately, he left quickly. At present, my uncle, Palace Master Yi, great ancestor Zheng, and Yang Shun are defending Feng City. The letter asking for help came to me a month ago. In fact, if you didn't come, I was going to ask Senior Jiang and Ancestor Zhang to go to the southern region with me. Feng City cannot be lost. Shou Wuck explained the serious situation. Who did it? Qin Hao asked. To be able to defeat Yang Shan. His cultivation was not simple. He was not defeated alone. Do you know Ning Tianxing's maternal family? Shou Wuck said. Yes. Qin Hao nodded. The Snow Fox tribe of the southern region Demon Forest. Ning Tianxing's mother, the Snow Fox King, joined Ning Wu's army with the Demon Emperors, greatly increasing his strength. The Fox ancestor of the Snow Fox tribe joined Ning Tianxing and defeated Yang Shun. In that battle, Yang Shun was powerless. If Li Yuan and Emperor Luo hadn't appeared at the critical moment to warn the Fox tribe, Yang Shun might have died. Shou Wuck told Qin Hao everything according to the information in the letter. The ancestors of the Demon Forest of the southern region Demon Forest had set up a boundary stone with the 7 heroes of the human race. The demon realm and the human realm would not interfere or invade each other. However, Ning Tianxing had the bloodline of the Snow Fox tribe. He was Prince Ningwu and also the Prince of the Fox tribe, the future Snow Fox King. With this relationship, the Fox tribe naturally would not abide by the agreement of their ancestors. They led the experts of the demon forest to step into the human realm and became a powerful force behind Ningwu. Ning Tianxing's mother, the current empress of the Fox tribe, is a Dao emperor. His great-grandfather, the Fox ancestor, is a true self-great emperor and a very powerful one at that. In addition, the Rock tribe of the demon forest and the Ice Bear tribe respected the Fox tribe and also entered the human realm to help. The Sword Sect, Night Luo Palace, Scorching Sun Temple, and the Zheng tribe suffered heavy casualties. If Emperor Luo and Li Yuan came in time, the consequences would be unimaginable. Shouwuk was especially nervous. Because he was far away in western Liang, he did not see it, so he was even more worried. The Demon Forest's monster tribe broke the rules, and the Arhut Palace and the Li tribe of the Proud God would not be willing. Otherwise, if the Yang God died and the Zheng tribe was destroyed, they would be next. The overlords could fight, but the monster tribe could not interfere. Therefore, the war was in a stalemate. The two armies faced each other in front of Feng City. Moreover, the Proud God army and the Arhut Palace's various sects were also stationed there. If the monster tribe dared to interfere again, they would not hesitate to join the Zheng tribe's camp and fight against the Ningwu Empire together. After all, this was no longer a matter between the human race. The monster tribe had also come to cause trouble. If this war was lost, the southern region would be controlled by the monster tribe in the future. There would be no place for the human race cultivators. The Li ancestor is a character. His current cultivation is unknown, but he is definitely not much weaker than the Fox ancestor. Because of this, the Fox ancestor did not dare to attack. Shouwuk said, "I know this person." Saint Emperor Jiang said. He moved forward and stood side by side with Qin Hao. "You should know him too." Qin Hao was startled. "I don't know. No way." Saint Emperor Jiang was speechless. After all, they were great emperors of the same era. The Li ancestor had proven his Tao 600 years ago. "I really don't remember." Qin Hao thought hard. "Who was surnamed Li?" "Li Xiusheng. He participated in the imperial banquet." Saint Emperor Jiang was completely speechless. "Oh, Li Xiusheng, you still don't know." Qin Hao said directly. He really did not remember, but since old monster Jiang knew him, he must be a character. "Yes, Li Xiusheng." In addition to this ancestor, the Li clan also has the spirit emperor Li Wanji and Li Yuan. The three emperor lords of the Li clan are a great threat to the Fox ancestor, the Rock King, and the Bear Emperor. They do not dare to casually step into the battlefield. Shouwuk said. In addition, Li Wanji had Lin Feng by his side. Both of them were immortal. Chapter 1871. With the help of the emperors of the Demon Forest, Ningwu's strength suddenly increased. Ning Tianxing, Ancestor Ning, and Ancestor Fox were three true selves. Ningwu had reached the pinnacle of Emperor Ming. In addition, Emperor Ming had a half-brother named Ning Weibai, who had obtained the opportunity to step into the Emperor Lord realm through a relic. Snow Fox King of the Demon Forest was an Emperor Lord. Peng King was an Emperor Lord. Bear Emperor of the Ice Bear clan was also an Emperor Lord. Three true selves, one pinnacle of Emperor Ming, and four Emperor Lords. How terrifying was their strength. Looking at Makamanji and Yin Ninghong's strength, it seemed too weak. The old disease caused by the battle tower in Yang God's body was barely enough to deal with one true self. Fighting with three people was undoubtedly suicide. However, this disadvantage was no longer a problem with the arrival of Qin Hao and the others. The demons of the demon realm won't give up their victory just because of Proud God and Arhut Palace. Let's meet up with Uncle Mu first. Qin Hao said. The demon forest was located in a corner of the southern region, and its resources and environment were not as good as the land of the human race. Their ancestors had set the rule, but they were not confident that they could defeat the 7 heroes of the southern region. Now, Ning Tianxing was born between the Ning clan and the Fox clan. He had the blood of both humans and demons, and was the perfect link to break the human race. With Ning Wu as the flag, the demons were greedy and bloodthirsty. They would definitely take half of the rich land of the southern region and let their descendants reproduce and become the kings of the new land. Wuk, Holy Emperor Jiang, and the others all understood this. Even if Proud God and Arhut Palace joined Feng City, they would not have the upper hand. There must be other reasons for Ning Wu's decision to stop the march. The 7 of them flew forward, crossing the South Sea. They tore the space without stopping. Soon, they arrived at the southern region in a day. They landed from the old land of Chang Kingdom and went straight to Feng City. After arriving at the southern region, Qin Hao looked down at the ground from the sky. He saw a large number of people in Zheng's territory, dragging their families to the north. The scale was extremely large. That was Proud God's territory. The people were taking refuge there. Perhaps, in their opinion, Feng City couldn't be defended any longer. The Zheng clan had only been restored for 40 or 50 years. Now, they were going to fall again and be annexed by Ning Wu. Many cities were devoid of people. Some small cities with weak defenses and even small towns had become empty. Qin Hao and the others could feel the atmosphere of panic spreading from below. Half of the empire's citizens were frantically fleeing, all because of the menacing Ning Wu's army. Of course, there were also some people who went in the opposite direction, rushing to the front line of Feng City. It seemed that they were ready to join the war that was about to break out. Most of these people were hot-blooded cultivators. Ning Wu had formed an alliance with the demon tribe to suppress his former allies. His treachery was naturally despicable. However, only a few people dared to move towards Feng City. Qin Hao and the others did not pay attention to what was going on below. Whether they stayed or left, it was the right of the people to leave. In the face of an unbearable disaster, it was human nature to choose to avoid it. But the few cultivators gathered in Chao Feng City would leave their glory in the annals of the southern region. We're here. The vast city ahead was getting closer and closer. The emperor's flag of the Zheng tribe was especially conspicuous on the city gate tower. Countless crossbows were lined up neatly on the battlements. Rows of soldiers stood on the city wall, filling up the passageway. Behind the city wall, there were large catapults reinforced with matrices and groups of war beasts clad in steel armor. You guys meet up with the others first. I'll be back soon, Qin Hao said. Like a graceful shadow, he directly crossed Feng City and rushed towards Ning Wu and the demon tribe army stationed at the front line of the southern river. Suddenly, all the Zheng tribe soldiers on the city wall looked up and could not help but cry out in surprise at Qin Hao's back. Who is that? Someone asked in shock. One man, one sword, going towards Ning Wu alone. How bold! Did he completely disregard Ning Wu and the demon emperors? No one suspected that Qin Hao had defected to the enemy. He came from the rear of Feng City and was an Emperor Path cultivator. If he had, he would have done so long ago. There was no need for him to choose now. Wuk, ancestor slaying. Numerous silhouettes soared into the air from the city, arriving in front of leader Wu Kei and the others. Makamanji, Elder Meng, and a group of senior members of the sword sect. Yi Ninghong, Su Yongfu, Grandma Yi Ying, and the golden-haired, golden-eyed sun god surrounded by majestic fire chi. Uncle, Palace Lord Yi, Senior Yi Ying, Senior Yang. Showuk bowed slightly to the crowd. That could it be? Makamanji's eyes widened as he watched Qin Hao's flaming figure leave. They had just noticed several tyrannical Emperor Qi descending over Feng City, but Qin Hao was too fast to react. By the time they reacted, he had already gone in the direction of Ning Wu. The long-lost aura appeared again, and it was extremely familiar. How could Makamanji not recognize it? Even the sun god's golden eyes stared cautiously. Don't get too excited. You should be going over to say hello to Ning Tianqing. Let's just wait. Jiawuk laughed lightly and patted Su Yongfu's shoulder. At this moment, the old demon's eyes were filled with tears. If one were to say who was the most familiar with Qin Hao's Emperor Qi, no one here would be more familiar with it than him. At this moment, Qin Hao crossed Feng City alone and came to the South River. Looking around, there were countless marching tents on both sides of the South River. As far as the eye could see, Ningwu's army seemed to have surrounded the entire South River. Qin Hao looked on indifferently. The red lotus flames surged around him. As the burning rules operated, the power of the flames grew stronger and stronger. He stood there alone, and the entire sky behind him turned crimson. The color was getting darker and darker. Immediately, he grasped the void, and the power of the way in his body erupted as if the heavens were one. With a buzzing sound, a halo of light erupted from his position. The halo of light expanded wildly, and everywhere it passed, the sky was filled with red lotus flames. Qin Hao pointed at Ningwu's army stationed on both sides of the South River. In an instant, under the halo of light, a rain of fire fell from the sky. Terrifying flames whistled like meteors, smashing into Ning Tianxing's army. Almost at the same time that Qin Hao made his move, all the emperors in Ningwu's army felt a suffocating sense of crisis. They rose into the air at the same time, just in time to see an incomparably spectacular scene. Under the blood-red sky, an endless rain of meteors fell. All the emperors in Ningwu's army were shocked. "Get out of the way." At this time, a seventh-stage Dao realm emperor, Yuan, roared loudly at the people around him. However, before he could muster up the courage to intercept the rain of fire, he saw this person take the lead and flee frantically into the distance. It wasn't that he didn't want to stop it, but he realized that this might couldn't be stopped at all. Roar! A deafening roar erupted from Ningwu's army. Immediately, a huge ice bear phantom appeared in the void. This phantom roared towards the sky, and a blizzard was spewed out from its huge mouth. The blizzard raged between heaven and earth, covering the sky and the sun. It wanted to block this disaster for the people below. Boom! Boom! A meteor shower fell from the sky, smashing into the snowstorm. At first, a meteor would sink into the sea, but as the flaming meteors continued to fall, bringing with them rays of light, the snowstorm was pierced through in less than 2 breaths, turning into steam and dissipating. The ice bear phantom in the air also shattered and collapsed, mixed with a miserable cry. Not weak. Among the many powerhouses of Ningwu's imperial path, an old man with white hair and beard spoke. This old man had an extraordinary temperament. Although he was old, one could vaguely see that he was very handsome when he was young from the contours of his face. However, his ears were different from that of ordinary people. They were long and pointed. He was the current ancestor of the Snow Fox clan, Ancestor Fox. When Ancestor Fox saw that the Ice Bear Patriarch couldn't hold on for more than 2 breaths, he knew that the cultivation of the person who cast the rain of fire had surpassed the Dao realm. Immediately, he spat out a wisp of air from his mouth towards the sky. This wisp of seemingly ethereal air spread out very quickly, and its power was beyond imagination. Almost instantly, the world was frozen. The sound of ice forming was loud. Between the sky and the earth, there seemed to be a layer of ice that was tens of thousands of feet thick, filling the space. Flaming meteors crashed into the ice layer, exploding into waves of fire. Although cracks appeared, they completely blocked the rain of fire and prevented Ningwu's army from being affected. At that moment, Qin Hao's emperors were firmly locked onto Ancestor Fox. Flame patterns appeared in his eyes, penetrating the space and seeing the old man's appearance clearly. Then, Qin Hao's eyes became sharper and sharper. The emperor's will resonated with the heavens. The falling rain of fire seemed to have turned into tens of thousands of divine swords. The original rumbling sound became extremely sharp and ear-piercing, as if sword chi was piercing through the world. Crack! A crack appeared in the ice layer. The incomparably hard ice layer exploded like a rock. The flaming sword chi continued to fall, and the crack grew bigger and bigger until it was penetrated by a sword. Ancestor Fox's defense was broken, and a chain reaction immediately occurred. The ice layer above Ningwu's army cracked and collapsed like an iceberg collapsing. With a whoosh, A sword chi fell directly on Ancestor Fox's head. Enough, another old voice murmured. Then, from the vast Ning Wu's army, countless golden figures soared into the sky like roaring dragons. They collided with the flaming sword chi in the sky. The two precepts and Tao wills clashed violently. Then, both were annihilated, and the world returned to peace. Qin Hao exhaled slightly. The corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. He said to the South River, "Tomorrow, the Zheng clan and Ning Tianxing will fight to the death. Ning Tianxing, I'll be waiting for you." With that, Qin Hao turned and returned to Feng City. The scorching qi that suppressed the world also disappeared. He broke my ice seal will. This person is not simple. Ancestor Fox glanced at his robe. A part of his robe had been torn by the sword qi. At that moment, Ning Wu's army on the ground was in an uproar. Many emperors were also shocked. Not only had Ancestor Fox's Tao will been broken, but even Ancestor Ning had not been able to completely block all the sword qi. More than a dozen military tents were set ablaze. The ink-black flames did not go out. The people in the tents were all gone. Who did it? Do you know him? In front of an incomparably luxurious imperial military tent, there was a group of extraordinary people. In the center of the group stood an old man. He asked expressionlessly, "I know him." Next to the old man, Crown Prince Ning Tianxing's expression changed greatly. He had not expected that Qin Hao was still alive. "Who is this person?" Ancestor Ning looked at Ning Tianxing and asked. There should not be such a powerful person in the Zheng dynasty. Even a sun god could not produce such a powerful attack. Not only do I know him, but the two great ancestors have cultivated for more than 1,000 years. They should have heard of this person. Ning Tianxing's eyes narrowed slightly. He squeezed through his teeth and said, "Dindi of the Daqin of the East Continent, Qin Hao." Chapter 1872. After a simple test, Qin Hao returned to Feng City. He had traveled a long way from western Liang and had used up some dilly on the way. He couldn't fight Ning Wu directly. That would be of no benefit to him and Wuk. However, he had gained something from this test. At least he had estimated Ning Wufeng's combat capability. In the realm of true self, Ancestor Fox and Ancestor Ning's cultivation was not bad. They could resist Qin Hao's attack together. Although he was confident that he could kill them together, the time it would take was enough to affect or even change the battle situation. Besides, the other side had more than 2 great emperors of true self. Ning Tianxing hadn't fought yet. Qin Hao wasn't too worried about this. Feng City had Holy Emperor Jiang, Sun God, and Wuk. Even if Ning Tianxing had the combat ability to delay Qin Hao, Feng City still had some advantages. 3 great emperors against 2 great emperors of true self, it would be difficult to lose. After Qin Hao left, the rain of fire that fell from the sky exerted immense pressure on Ning Wu. Ancestor Fox and the Ning clan were well aware that they were no match for Qin Hao in a one-on-one battle. However, since things had come to this, it was impossible for Ning Wu and the demonic beasts to retreat. If they wanted to retreat, they would have to see if the Zheng clan agreed. This was no longer a small conflict between overlords, but a battle of life and death. Feng City, Zheng Imperial Palace. At this time, in the solemn main hall of the Imperial Palace, many emperors sat upright. The Sword Sect, Scorching Sun Temple, Night Luo Palace, and the Zheng clan, plus Holy Emperor Jiang, Ancestor Zhan, and Qin Yun, who Qin Hao had brought from Beijiang and western Liang, were extremely powerful. This gave the Zheng clan great confidence. Hearing the deafening cheers of the soldiers outside the Imperial Palace, the long-time depression caused by Ning Wu was swept away. You suppressed Ning Wu's arrogance with a simple return and boosted the morale of our army. That's your style? Holy Emperor Jiang said with a smile. The rest of the people in the hall looked very relaxed. Hearing the cheers from outside, they were encouraged. The old fox from the demon forest is not simple. The old man from the 3rd branch of the Ning family is even stronger. He's already close to the unblemished path. So, which one do you want to pick? Qin Hao said to old monster Jiang. He pressed his palm on the back of the sun god, and the red lotus tyrannical fire roared in his body, turning into a powerful vortex of power. Strands of golden crow threads were constantly moving from the sun god's body to Qin Hao's palm, as if they were being forcefully pulled over. Finally, they slowly disappeared under his palm. At the same time, his other hand was wrapped in sparkling water vapor. He placed it on the shoulder of the Yang spirit. To be precise, I do control the power of the flawless great path, but I always feel that there's a little bit missing. I can't completely integrate it with the will of the emperor. The old man from the Ning family is a bit fierce, but if he is killed by Wuk in this battle, his sword heart will definitely sublimate. I support his decision. Good brother. Showuk's mouth cracked into a smile. This was a true friend. All right then. Makamanji sighed slightly. Soon, the worry in his heart dissipated. Qin Hao was personally involved in this battle. If Wuk was defeated by Ancestor Ning, he should not be in danger. In that case, I will deal with the old fox of Demon Forest, said Saint Emperor Jiang. He could not kill the other party, but vice versa. Moreover, he could prevent Ancestor Fox from affecting the battle. It all depended on whose teammate gained the advantage first. Old Jiang, I will leave Ancestor Fox to you. Wuk will deal with the old man from the Ning family. Uncle Mu, Palace Lord Yi. Qin Hao looked at the two. I will leave Emperor Ning Wu Ming to you. No problem. Makamanji and Yi Ninghong said at the same time. Emperor Ning Wu Ming had proven his Dao, but they were not ordinary Dao confirming emperors. The odds of victory were in their favor. Qin Yun, you have just become an imperial lord. Ning Wu Ming and Ning Wei Bai are also imperial lords. They are suitable to be your opponents, said Qin Hao. Understood. Qin Yun nodded. His supreme emperor weapon, the Xinyuan war halberd, was already thirsting for battle. The three emperor lords of Demon Forest, the Snow Fox King, the Great Peng King, and the Ice Bear Patriarch, who was injured by me. Surnamed Yang, you have no objections, right? Qin Hao looked at Sun God and said, 3 Dao confirming emperors. Dealing with them is a piece of cake, but who will deal with Ning Tianqing? Sun God's old illness had been cured. It was not a big problem for him to deal with 3 Dao confirming emperors on his own. However, Ning Tianqing's cultivation was not as simple as it seemed. Although both sides had been injured in the battle, he always felt that Ning Tianqing did not use his full strength on purpose. Naturally, I will deal with him. Qin Hao replied with a smile. The rest of the people in the hall also laughed. Now that Dindu was Feng City's commander-in-chief, the commander-in-chief naturally faced the commander-in-chief. The corner of Sun God's mouth twitched a few times. He wanted to say a few words of warning, but in the end, he did not say anything. He said, with you, that bastard from the Ning family is finished even if he has great abilities. The dignified East Continent Dendi had swept through the 6 barbarians and settled the 8 wastelands 600 years ago. The souls of Emperor Lords could be found everywhere under the Sunset Arrow, including his 2 masters. Any one of Qin Hao's achievements was enough to make people slap the table and praise him. Dealing with a small Ning Tianqing, he naturally did not need to remind him. Well, it's settled then. Holy Emperor Jiang stood up and said, the peak combat strength had been dealt with. The rest was not a concern. With the rock-solid defensive strength of Feng City, no matter how fierce Ning Tianqing's army was, it would be difficult for them to break through in a short time. By then, the victory and defeat of this group of Emperor Lords would have been decided. It's good, but what about us? Zhengzhu spread out his hands helplessly. His pair of pitiful eyes scanned the crowd. He was also an Emperor Lord. He should do something, right? Moreover, this battle was for the Zheng family. Why did it seem like he had become an outsider? Yes, my lord. What about me? Zhang Guang, his expression was also very uncomfortable. He had come all the way here from Shiliang, but in the end, the opponents were arranged. Was he allowed to watch the battle? Of course, I have my reasons for this arrangement. Guang He, you, and Zhengzhu will support the battle at any time and guard against Ning Tianqing's backup, Qin Hao said. Ning Tianxing and Yao Lin only had this little strength? Not really. At least, Qin Hao still remembered that the Ning family had a fifth bloodline. Although the fifth bloodline's Emperor Lord, Ning Lengjue, had lost to Emperor Ning Wuming and Patriarch Ning Sangsong had died, the fifth bloodline's organization was still intact. There were many Emperor Dao experts and should not be underestimated. Qin Hao was not clear about the relationship between the two bloodlines of the Ning family. It was better to be cautious. If the fifth bloodline suddenly joined the battle, with Zhang Guang, he and Zheng Zhu holding the fort, Ning Lingjue would not be able to cause too much trouble. He would not be flustered when the time came. All right, Zhang Guang, he was obedient to Dendi, and Zheng Zhu had no objections. Qin Hao's foresight was very accurate. Zheng Zhu indeed had to be cautious of the fifth bloodline of the Ning family. Master, have you been well all these years? After everything was arranged properly, Blood Emperor Su Yongfu finally dared to speak. He was not afraid of anyone, but he respected Qin Hao. Everything is fine. Qin Hao patted Old Demon's shoulder. Back then, everyone had risked their lives to save him and Wei Wei in the Valley of the Gods. He still remembered the unforgettable scenes. Let's take a walk outside. The master and servant have parted for more than 20 years. They must have a lot to talk about. Divine Emperor Jiang nodded at Qin Hao and stepped out of the hall first. Let's go and check the city's defenses and defensive equipment. Zheng Zhu pulled Zheng Qingqi and walked out with majestic steps, not giving Zheng Qingqi any chance to catch up with Qin Hao. The two left the battlefield at the same time and converged in the direction of Emperor Ming. Soon, there was a huge commotion. Everything was going according to Qin Hao's plan yesterday. Ning Tianxing's expression changed. Makamanji and Yi Ninghong were both at the extreme realm of Dao validation. His father might be in danger in this battle. At this moment, he looked at the three small formations in the demon forest. His gaze landed on the snow fox race. He exchanged glances with an extremely beautiful lady in a pure white robe. She was Ning Tianxing's birth mother, the snow fox monarch. Let's go. The snow fox monarch naturally understood what Ning Tianxing meant. She was also worried that something might happen to Emperor Ming. 3 rays of emperor light burst out from the formation. Together with the Great Peng Races, Great Peng Races, Great Peng Race, and Great Bear Monarch, the 3 Dao validation emperors flew towards Emperor Ming's battle, intending to help. Boom! Pencil, blazing flames of the way blocked the path of the snow fox monarch and the other emperors. The divine Hall's Yang god completely lost his form and turned into a ball of flames of the way. He said in an extremely cold voice, "Where are you going?" He hadn't even agreed to help Emperor Ning Wu Ming. Needless to say, at this moment, extremely cold will of the way swept through the world. It came from the 3 Dao validation emperors of the demon forest. They lived in a world of ice and snow. The will of the way they comprehended was related to ice and snow. They attacked the divine Hall's Yang god at the same time. In an instant, the ice and snow in the sky raged wildly, swallowing everything. A huge white fox appeared behind the snow fox monarch. It was her natal bee spirit. It stood tall in the air and swayed its 7 tails like the fox ancestor. This meant that she had 7 tails to protect her life. It was very difficult to kill her directly. However, Ning Tianxing's 3rd emperor spirit had 9 tails. The 9-tailed phantom fox was the supreme existence of the celestial fox clan. It had only been passed down from generation to generation by the Grand Elder. In the end, it became a reality through her son. Ning Tianxing had the supreme bloodline power of the celestial fox ancestor. Even the heavens wanted the fox clan to rise. It was because of this that the demon forest stood firmly behind the Ningwu Empire without hesitation and became their powerful foreign aid. Not only the Fox clan, but the Rock clan and the Ice Bear clan also saw Ning Tianqing's potential and decided to follow him because he was the true son of heaven. He was bound to become the master of the divine wilderness. Qin Hao watched as his young god was caught in the joint attack of the three demon emperors. The Snow Fox Monarch's strength was extraordinary. Although it hadn't reached the peak of Dao validation, it was about the same level as Looming.